Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to be talking about Queen of Ghouls by Michael Lewis Jr. This was a book that I was contacted by the author about back in February of this year. I bought it in February of this year, and here we are. Finally, I just got it read, so now we're going to talk about it. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. If you're interested in another way to support the channel, please consider becoming a member. The second thing is, if you would like to be featured on this channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lamoy, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday of the month, we bask in your creativity. This month, however, /January/ the end of this year, we're doing the third annual cringe stream where you just interpret what cringe means and then write your heart out, because it is just meant to have fun. It is meant to be a laugh night. And then the last day of this year, during New Year's Eve, we are going to bask in whatever beautiful work you guys create. And then the second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit the first chapter and the cover, that chapter will be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work. I've purchased books that I've read from that list. Hopefully other people have as well. And the third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places. Two Good Books, including the local library upon request. My newest novel, Body More Zero, came out in October, featuring these two gentlemen right here. When I do my end of the year video, I will announce what I am working on and what you should probably expect to come out next year. With that said, let's jump into the story. I'm going to start out with a brief summary because that's kind of what I wanted to start doing. And then we'll get into the full book summary and discussion. Now, this is going to be full of spoilers and critical opinions. And so if you're not prepared for that, do what you need to do. I am also just sharing my opinions, and just because I critique something does not mean that other people may not enjoy what I am reading. What I enjoy is the discussion of the book, the craft, the topics in general. So that's what we do here. So a brief summary of this book would be that it is about a boy named Eldred Kincaid, and he goes into a nearby forest to hunt, and shortly after coming out of the forest, his village is attacked by ghouls, and the ghouls attack his village. Now, the ghouls belong to this woman named Charlotte, who is Eldred's mother's sister. And Eldred's mother's sister, Charlotte, and that coven of witches are trying to get rid of the magic seal that is in that area in order to let the elder gods be released again, because I think it's has to do with there's some reference that it has to do with some of the gods just want to kill people, but I actually don't know why the coven wants to release the destructive elder gods. That information is never actually given. This is the first book in the Wildervale Grimoire series, so there will be more, and I would describe this book as middle grade. The writing is clean, there's no swearing, there's no sex, there's no romance, it's mostly focused on action, and it is about a younger man coming into his own and having to take over the responsibilities that related to his parents, though I would argue that stuff kicked off because he disobeyed, but there are some red herrings in here. Anyway, that is the basic. Now getting into the full of it, starting with the first page to get a feel for the author's writing style. Quote, "Mist weaved its way through the trees, carried on a silent breeze. Dark leaves rustled gently overhead, and a single owl called to the night, a distant, ominous wail. A lone figure sat below the canopy. The forest, shaded from the light of the stars and moon, leaned against an ancient oak tree. A little fire, flicked by his feet, kept the light only by a few twigs and a single, thoroughly charred log. Nearby, hanging from a limb, was a fresh deer, hunted and cleaned earlier the previous day. Next to it was a small wooden sled laden with some provisions. Outside of the dim orange ring of light from the fire, the forest was pitch black. The figure grumbled something under his breath and rolled over onto his side, sliding off the tree and onto the ground. He lurched awake as his bare cheek touched the cold, dewy grass beside him. Flustered, he wiped the side of his face vigorously with his sleeve, glancing around his small clearing through bleary eyes. After a moment, he let out a sigh of relief as reality set in and he realized where he was. With a grunt, he twisted at the waist, bracing himself on a tree, his back giving out a series of loud cracks and pops. Contentedly, he settled back against the bark and closed his eyes again, crossing his arms over his chest, snuggling his chin into the collar of the crude deer-hide jacket that he wore. He was a thin young man, barely 5.5 feet tall, with uneven blonde hair sticking out in all directions. His face was narrow, with tired eyes and bushy eyebrows. Stubble coated his jaw and lip, though too scraggly to grow an actual beard. A scar from a deer kick when he was younger ran along his cheek to his jaw. Another scar, a burn from a house fire when he was very young, peeked out under his hairline and crept onto his forehead. He wore a simple, crude jacket made of deer hide that hung down to his thighs and thick leather chaps. His shirt was a spotty and stained off-white, with the necktie together with strings, while his pants appeared to be made of potato sack canvas. Heavy black boots adorned his feet with high tops that doubled back and were stitched with golden thread. Beside him, leaned against a tree, was a bow and quiver. The quiver held 10 or so arrows and was made of a combination of deer leather and sticks. So clearly we're opening up with a long description. This unnamed character is hunting in the forest around his camp. And if you're wondering if this is a mystery character, it's not. This is the main character. So it was kind of a choice to not name the character. Since it is the main character, and then, using it as just this shadow of a person, the figure, this guy in the intro makes it come off as more sinister than it actually is. Moving on, the main character appears to be young, being called a young boy by the narrator and about 5'5". He's following this shadow of a creature through the woods, and eventually it disappears, and he thinks that he might have imagined it because the shadow was very strange looking. Eventually, he passes out from exhaustion. He wakes up, and things seem mostly all right as he walks to hunt again, and then things happen as he's on the move again. Quote, "As he walked away, there was a soft rustling in the trees that he had just hauled his deer into. It was too quiet for him to hear over his own footsteps as he stomped off. Very slowly, a hand reached out of the branches toward the deer. The fingers, of which there were only 3, were long and grotesque, tipped with claw-like curved nails that glinted like metal. On the back of the hand were a mix of feathers and hair, growing thicker the further up the arm they went. The skin was almost scaly, like a chicken's foot, and a dark, burnt black color. Effortlessly, it ran a single nail down the flank of the deer, splitting the hide open. The second hand appeared and inserted a small, dull gray stone into the slice in the deer. The creature cooed softly, obviously pleased as it pressed the slit back together, smoothing the hair over it, making the cut almost invisible. Withdrawing its arms, the creature slunk back into the tree, its nails scraping on the bark. A single feather fell from the branches, alighting gently on the sled, a dark, oily sheen on its black surface, the tip colored a deep blood red." At this point, I wasn't sure what he sees, if he saw this at all, but as I've gotten through the story, I'm assuming this is what set off the ghouls coming to the village. But Eldred doesn't acknowledge seeing this, so it just reads like something different, and that also has to do with how the narrator is so distant. After this happens, the boy just keeps on hunting a deer and catches it without a problem or a reference to the claw. If this is because it's an omni-narrator, I can't say that I'm a fan of it because it just doesn't show what the character is seeing, and it defeats the tension in the moment. And it feels like it is supposed to be tense because you got this creepy, ghoulish thing inserting a stone into this dead animal or into this animal, but it's the wrong kind of mystery for me. But then again, I'm not really a fan of omni-narrators because they're generally very emotionless. They're very generally disconnected, and it's harder to care about the characters. They're just less focused. We finally get a name for the main character a couple of pages in. It takes him to return to the village and for somebody to greet him, calling him Eldred. It's the baker. It's kind of weird that we wouldn't receive his name early on. One of the things that is generally talked about is you want to, if you can, bring in your main character's name as soon as possible. And often the first name mentioned in the book, maybe not, but often the first name mentioned in a book in the narration is going to be the main character. Now, this isn't every time, unless it's first person, then you obviously know who it is. But it's just a general observation. If you even look at, and this is going to be a spoiler for a completely different book, so prepare yourself if you haven't read Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. The first character introduced in And Then There Were None is the character behind the murders. He is the one in the epilogue that then writes the epilogue. So it is not, and it's not like a rule, again, it's just an observation. And the sooner that you mention the main character's name to the reader, the sooner that they start knowing who the story is about. And so you don't really want to hold off on hiding it unless you have a very good reason for hiding it. And since this was just following Eldred hunting, and that's a fairly common intro to a fantasy story, I didn't really understand the choice to shroud his name until somebody mentioned it. Now, normally what I've recognized and what I see, and even what I do when a name is not mentioned in the narration, is because it is a close third-person perspective, and so then whoever the narration is inspired by doesn't know the character's name yet. But that wouldn't be the main character, and an omni-narrator wouldn't really have a reason to do this. Specifically with the main character. An omni character might do it with like the stranger because we're going to recognize the stranger as the stranger. But for the main character, I didn't really understand this choice when we're dealing with an omnipresent narrator. It felt like it was trying to be more cinematic for me. A further note on that was that it felt like it was trying to be more cinematic and mysterious, but it wasn't really necessary for setting the style of this and mostly just kept the reader apart from the central character. Anyway, Eldred gets home and is invited to breakfast that his dad is making because he's worked hard, and then he sets up his kills to be cleaned and prepared for food later. That would be the end of the first chapter, and if we're looking at what this is doing, it appears to be setting up the status quo, as we don't necessarily have any clue as to what the story is going to be about yet. What the driving force might be, what Eldred's desires are, what has gotten interrupted, what the thing in the forest was, because it was such a minute thing. Which to me hints that this first chapter is setting up the norm in order to be broken in the near future. Woken up for breakfast by this little girl named Maddie, Eldred washes up and meets his dad. Eldred mentions seeing something spooky in the woods, but is not sure what it was. Dad asks him if he went into the deep woods, and he's like, yes, I did go into the deep woods. And Dad is like, you were never supposed to go into the deep woods. Never go there again. I think that would have been a good thing to mention in the first chapter in order to add stakes, in order to know that he was breaking something that he shouldn't have been breaking and like why he was doing that. I think it would have been a good idea to set up the stakes for what the deep woods are in the first chapter, and that he was knowingly going against his father. So that when it got to this chapter and he's like, yeah, I did that, there is more violation on it. If he was very familiar with the rules of like, you're not supposed to go into the deep woods, and it makes me wonder why he even went there in the first place if it was off limits. It doesn't really give a reason why. It doesn't express that he was being defiant, that he was just being brave and courageous there, and he didn't need to go there to hunt. So it didn't really give a reason for him to violate his father's wishes, but it doesn't help that his father apparently didn't give any rules for or any reasons for why not to go into the deep woods. So it might have just seemed arbitrary to Eldred. And that also sets up the dynamic between Eldred and his father, which would be that Eldred doesn't respect his father's wishes, and that Eldred's father doesn't really give reasons behind the orders that he gives. That's kind of the implication. Based on the way that his dad acts so defensive about the deep woods, you'd think that it'd be something that he taught Eldred well before sending him out there on his own to go hunting, so Eldred would need an excuse for why he went in there. Everybody gets together for breakfast. A pretty big family scene because it includes Eldred's family and the baker's family. Eldred talks about seeing something in the woods and it was creepy again, and then he's going with Maddie, a little girl, to the pond in the woods. As he's going outside, we run into this next plot point. Quote, "Thanks, Mrs. Forge," Eldred said, grabbing a jacket and hurrying out into the storefront. Marshall and the elderly man, Derek, were in the middle of a clearly very serious conversation. They paused as he entered the room, Marshall gesturing over. "Stay out of the inn for a few days," Marshall said quietly. "Derek here was just telling me." "What?" Eldred started, a little taken aback by the serious tone. "A dozen people have gotten sick in the past few days," Derek said. "They've got them in the rooms up in the inn while we wait for a doctor from Gladstone." It starts as a fever, and then they move to bleeding from their eyes, and finally they fall into terrible sleep, screaming and yelling and carrying on, and they won't wake up, Derek explained, scratching the stubble on his throat. They be saying it's bad dreams, but I ain't never heard of dreams that don't let you wake up. Sounding like zombies. After repeating that there's a sickness in the inn like 3 times, he finally meets up with Mary, this girl about his age, and they race to the pond in the woods. Then he's telling her about the weird bird that he saw in the forest. 30 pages in, and it's been breakfast and repeating a weird bird story and an illness in the inn. That's about as far as we got. It feels like there should be tension here, but it's just there's not. And the repetition, even if it was told to different people who didn't know any better, it was weakening the intrigue for me and wasn't adding anything the times that it was repeated. Eldred tells Mary how dangerous the deep woods is, and she thinks it sounds exciting. Eldred wants to live a safe life, which maybe don't go gallivanting into the dangerous woods that you didn't need to go into in order to catch the deer if you want a safe, quiet life. So again, that kind of makes you question what his motivations were for going into the deep woods when he's like, I don't even want trouble, and my dad said it was dangerous to go in there, but I went in there anyway. It would have made more sense if this book maybe started out with Eldred and Mary talking before he went on his hunt and mentioned the deep woods, and she's like, bro, that's cool. I wish I could go into the deep woods. And so then he actually goes into the deep woods to impress her because he's got a thing for her, and he could have even picked up that rock that was put inside of the deer to bring her back a souvenir from the deep woods because the rock was so pretty. And that could have also been the reason behind why she disappeared, or why she does disappear. That would have been something. Who cares if dad says to stay out of the deep woods if you're going to impress the girl that you like? And then you got a reason for Mary to disappear the way that she does in just a little bit. Mary then excuses herself to wash up while Eldred wades in the shallow water. Out of nowhere, Charlotte, the charlatan, shows up. I call her this because she's a beautiful woman wearing red who knows who Eldred is and obviously shows up with seduction in her being. The woman pursues and Eldred retreats and eventually runs into Mary, realizing that the woman was some kind of a vision. But he doesn't know who she was or how it happened. It turns out that this whole thing with Charlotte the charlatan was a dream, and Mary was letting Eldred sleep because when she came back, he was passed out. And they talk about how that thing that he saw had the same eyes as the creature in the woods. It doesn't spend a lot of time that it needs to build the spooky description that it's looking for, and then it just gets resolved, like, quote, there was a woman, and she said that she knew me from someone close to me, and she started walking on water. He summarized his dream for her. Thank you for that telling language, by the way. Walking on water, that's something. She gave him a smile. I wish I could do that. Yeah. And then she said that I should come to her, and it was really loud, and then her eyes changed. He paused, the minute details of the dream slowly fading from his memory. They looked like the thing from the deep woods' eyes. The pair sat in silence for a bit, Mary pondering over the dream, Eldred trying to forget it. Come on, we should get home. Mary finally broke the silence, getting to her feet. She gave Eldred a small, reassuring smile. All right, Eldred nodded, the stress in his chest causing his heart to thump unyieldingly and hold himself up. Now, by comparison, we actually had more time spent on the breakfast conversation and describing breakfast than we did this creepy woman. The two of them return home, separating to go to their respective houses, but Dad isn't at home. Baker's daughter, Maddie, is there with Eldred's little brother, Alton. Eldred decides to go check on Mary, but she's not at her house. Glass is broken out, blood is in her room, and no one is there. He looks around for his dad and her dad and finds them at the inn. The air is full of screaming of the nightmarish sick that are kept inside of the inn. Eldred tells the parents that he found blood in a broken window but no Mary back at the house. The other two kids should be safe at the Eldred's house, though. The two fathers set off to go look for Mary. The build in this section feels not only arbitrary but really slow. Most of this chapter is just a slice of life feeling, and then the moments of tension, i.e. Charlotte's introduction, is clipped and heavy-handed, and then there's not much focus when it could intrigue. I don't know why Mary split when it was obvious that her sister was with Eldred's brother, not at the house. I assume that she had been there since before, and I'm not getting a sense of personality really from anyone. We then go to Eldred feeling things to make him think of the forest 2 nights ago. What I think would have helped the tension in this moment would have been some reference to mythologies of the deep woods that Eldred was overlooking, that his father had told him when he was growing up and he didn't think that they were real, maybe even laughing at it like it wasn't so bad. It was just tales from his parents that they told him, which is Actually kind of ironic, since we're going to learn that his father thought all of the, or his father claims that he figured all of the stuff about the forest was just old wives' tales. Meanwhile, the father was married to a witch who was part of a coven that his brother-in-law has also been hunting for a while. But he's the one that's like, it's all just fake. I think it would have made more sense for Eldred to think that it's fake and not believe his dad's warnings, because he had never seen it. Plus, letting us in on the legend of the deep woods and how these people live and what these people are afraid of gives us an idea of the setting, of the mythology, of the lore, and of what is normal in this world. It would also have added stakes to his defying his dad in order to go into the deep woods. And if you put that on top of if he went in to impress Mary and to get her a stone that she could maybe make a necklace out of to wear because she couldn't go into the deep woods herself, it just adds more power to that moment. Without any weight to what is being referenced as spooky, there's not any real tension or power in continuing to reference the forest. Part of the importance to this is to introduce the reader to the potential threat, setting up a gun beforehand, as it were, like Chekhov's gun. Everyone in the village is now attacked by this creature thing that we don't have much of a background for. Going over to the younger brother Alton and Mary's sister Maddie/Matilda in the house, they are also being attacked by this beast alongside of a woman. The kids get away and reunite with their parents. Dad leaves the kids with Mom and then runs off to find out what's going on. Eldred then wakes up on the stoop on his home, which was partially burned down. I don't really know. He kind of falls asleep at random times, so maybe he's a little bit on the narcoleptic side. The bakery across the street is also burned down. He got home, there was all of this screaming, the other places were on fire, he falls asleep on the stoop of his house, wakes up and there's more fire. I'm kind of... Everyone regroups, though they can't find Mary. They exchange information about what they saw happening, what they think is happening, and then Eldred tells his dad about the woman he saw at the river earlier when he fell asleep. So we're doing a little bit more repetition here. After putting Eldred to bed, Daddy Eldred is downstairs talking to the younger one and the others, it seems, retconning what's going on. Also, for the record, Daddy Eldred's name is Eldred Sr., so throughout this, I'm just going to call him Daddy Eldred because it makes a better differentiation between the two for me. Quote, "I can't leave with Bowen," Marshall sighed, taking a seat at the front counter as Eldred Sr. came back into the room, putting his beaten and bruised son to bed. Alton was on his stool, slowly gnawing on his jerky, watching the men curiously. "I know," Eldred Sr. nodded, dropping onto his chair next to his younger son. "And you're not the only one. The Cobbs and Darcy Straits both had people taken and are out for blood." "Who else were taken?" Marshall asked, staring at the counter. "Cobb's wife, Darcy's wife, the entire Allgood family, Friedman and his son's 2 farmhands, and Jamie's 2 boys." Eldred Sr. listed, pulling a heavy pewter bottle from under the counter along with a pair of old wooden cups. "And there are so many people with the sleeping madness now." He poured the drinks and sat one of the cups, brimming with wine, in front of Marshall. So I have a hard time caring about any of this because I don't feel like the story actually built me into knowing or caring about anyone before things actually happened. I don't know the lore of what's going on. What is this? Sleeping madness was never introduced. The fact that it was a threat was never introduced, but they're all very familiar with it. So I'm kind of being kept at arm's length with this everything, and it's kind of just like throwing stuff at you. I don't know what the threat is beyond it's spooky, and I just don't feel like I was brought into the story to be a part of it and given the information I needed from a reader, from the reader's perspective. But I'm also a character reader first, so I care about knowing the character personalities, the backgrounds, the way that they live, and that's not through exposition. That's just through seeing how these characters interact and watching them motivate themselves through what they want and what they need and how things around them interact. And we just don't get any sense of the functionality of this society. However, if you don't mind action stories that act like this, it might work for you. There are also so many characters, and even young Eldred wasn't warned before about his actions that likely got everyone in trouble by going into the deep woods, especially if we're looking at that rock. Even if he had just been given a warning when he was sent off, hey, you're going to be the one to go and get to the deer because you're a man now and you need to go and hunt on your own, but do not go into the deep woods, a warning warning just as simple as that, knowing that he was told not to go in there, still would have showed something of defiance, bravery, and or stupidity. After preparations, they're sending Eldred into the forest to go looking for the missing people, but not to fight the monsters because he'll easily be overwhelmed. He is being sent in because he knows the forest better than anyone else. This feels like something that could have been established earlier. I'm also not a big fan of this. Quote, "And if anything happens out there, I need you to run as fast as you can. Just get out of the woods, go home." "What do you mean if anything happens?" Eldred questioned. "Mr. Forge can handle anything out there. I just need you to be careful. If it feels wrong, turn and come back immediately," Eldred Sr. explained. "Your safety is my #1 priority, and it kills me that I can't go in person to make sure that you're all right. Promise me that if you find wherever they're coming from, you head straight home and leave it to the others to take care of." Why not just tell him the dangers? Does this guy not know what the dangers are, even if they're related to his wife? His wife will later even find that his wife wrote letters about what's going on, that his wife was the one that could make the ghouls, which is what Charlotte is now doing because Charlotte has his wife's book of magic. I don't understand what this character has seen and what is common. Because he acts like he doesn't know, but he is so heavily involved in all of this stuff that it just doesn't make any sense to me. And the fact that he's like, well, it's dangerous in the woods, don't go in the woods, but there's no mythology and there's nothing that he can just tell the kids, even if it's a made-up story. But they have also got the sleeping madness. So there has to be, what does the sleeping madness normally turn into? Have they seen what happens with the sleeping madness before? Because they all have a name for it and they seem familiar with it. So going forward, Eldred and his team are going deeper into the forest, and they run into these specks of light that turn out to be people. The Cobb family that had gone in with him got scared, leaving behind Eldred and Mary's father. The woman that Eldred saw in his dreams arrives and tells Eldred that he's too valuable, and she can't wait to see him in person. Also, Mary will be a sacrifice for her coven. The two of them are attacked. Eldritch kills a bunch of the Loinclothians that are described as being in the woods, these people that are servants to Charlotte. They have tattoos on their bodies that match the symbols on Eldred's neck, he notices. They also don't bleed. Malcolm, who is Mary's father, is impressed. The woman, Charlotte, has appeared and disappeared again and uses the Loinclothians as the woman, Charlotte, continues to appear and disappear, using the Loinclothians as meat soldiers. Eldritch has excellent bow skills, and the adult around him is very impressed. When Eldred wins, he demands to know what the woman wants, and she says that she can't tell him yet, before immediately telling him that she is after his brother, who is actually her son, whom his mother kidnapped. And Eldred is so upset that this woman hates his mother that he asks what his mother ever did to her. You know, aside from stealing her child away from her. Lady is mad because Eldritch's mother was a magic prodigy and was going to help her with her own awesome powers and success, and then at the end of it all decided to walk away from the coven and stole away her magic. "What do you want from me?" Eldred asked, no one in particular, just shouting it at the crowd in front of him. "I can't tell you that. Not yet," she responded. "And you can thank your mother for that. Had she not interfered, I would have Alton and you would be falling into madness and Bowen Valley would be burnt to the ground. You had to stumble around where you weren't supposed to be. You had to rush my plans." "What do you want with my brother?" Eldred spat, a surge of confidence suddenly pulsing through his body. He took a step toward the crowd, which reacted immediately, throwing themselves back from him, piling up and falling over one another. A long, high laugh filled the air, the well pulsing with light. "Your brother," the voice laughed. "He was never your brother. He is your cousin, boy, born to Charlotte Vilderbale and stolen by Allison and Eldred. I simply want to retake what is mine." So, why are all of these Loinclothians and or mindless warriors, I'm assuming they're mindless warriors because other things created by Charlotte are considered mindless warriors, why are they all afraid of this kid? Very, very youth in depiction. Meanwhile, back at the village, Daddy Eldred is upset that he didn't get to go with his son and is worried that his son might be dead because the other kids came back with blood all over them. And there is no way that his son could be alive after that. Then little brother Alton is randomly asking some other guy about who his mom is because Dad never told him the full truth. And here we have more plot over character, forced exposition, which doesn't actually come into play ever. I'm going to come back to this at my end of the video notes because this is something that bothers me. It's just exposition dumping. Again, it's repeated information because we just heard that Alton is Charlotte's son who was stolen. So now we're getting it from another perspective, but we're getting it in another perspective, in Alton's perspective, the affected child who is not going to respond to it and is never going to come up ever again. But worse than that, you have this random adult who is supposed to be friends with Alton's father, who knows that Alton's father has been keeping this from him and decides that it is his business, his job to tell Alton this secret that should be Alton's father's choice to share. And then also, no repercussions, so whatever. Again, it doesn't come up, whatever. People can make bad decisions. But then immediately after expositing this information, he's like, damn my mouth. There's no resistance to not telling this child things. Like, go and ask your father. That's something that he should tell you. There could have been an opportunity for Alton to even get angry that people were keeping secrets from him, and everybody seemed to know things that he doesn't know. Especially since it's a common theme in this that people are being used or being tempted by the witches for revenge and vengeance, is that could have been used as a weak spot for Alton. So I don't really know why this happened. This reminds me of Hans, and his name is Augustin, who is 30 years older than Swanee, the best friend of her dad, used to date her mother before he had to break up with the mother because he was the key holder of that district and had an arranged marriage basically in the Teuton culture. And he took her outside to a gazebo, danced in a gazebo, and told her the secret of her family, that they were Teutons and had magical powers, and helped her awaken her magical powers. And it felt very groomy and very pedophilic in a way, because it felt like a metaphor. But it's also one of those things of like, don't tell your father I took you outside and I did this thing with you. That's like a violation of trust for no good reason. Even worse when it's irrelevant to the story. Anyway, quote, "Oh, I didn't realize that you've been there so long," he sputtered, looking around for the boy's father, but to no avail. He was still out back, working on getting the wagon ready. "Dad wouldn't tell me," Alton said, climbing up onto the empty stool across from the man, "but I want to know." "All right, kid," Darcy sighed. "You can't let your father know I told you, but I'll do you a favor." Alton leaned in, resting his arms on the counter, gazing up at the man's steely gray eyes. "Your mother practiced a religion called God's Sent. It involved a lot of rituals and things. We think that she was going to sacrifice you for one of her rituals, and your dad got you out of there before she could finish it." The boy's eyes widened, his mouth hanging agape. He had known that she was a wicked woman from what his father had told him a short year prior, but he hadn't mentioned that level of evil, to sacrifice her own son for her religion, to sacrifice him. "How did she die?" Alton asked after a long pause, causing Darcy to grumble under his breath. "She was burned in the old cabin on the east side of town," Darcy said flatly. "We didn't realize that she was inside when we went to burn it down after Eldred and Marshall got you out, but we found her body later after the fires had died down." The boy didn't respond. Instead, he hopped off his stool and padded away down the hall and up the stairs. "Gotta keep my mouth shut," Darcy grumbled to himself, taking another drink of his wine. So clearly she's not dead. Or she's some kind of spirit of version of whatever. But I think, considering she's a witch, I don't think that they should have just jumped on she's definitely dead. But also, a buddy, the fact that you're telling this kid that y'all murdered his mother without his dad being present and agreeing to this, I feel like makes it worse. So with everything going on in this town, some of the township want to flee. Daddy Eldred doesn't, as he wants to wait for his son to come back out of the woods. There is a fight between the different people in this town, and it's because the town is being like attacked by ghouls and because of the, sleeping nightmare people, that they want to flee. The Daddy Eldred says, "Fine, you can leave, but I'm staying here." The fleeing people are like, "We're gonna take the weapons." And Daddy is like, "No, you can't take any of the weapons that aren't yours." And then he's like, and then Rebel Guy is like, "But then you just want us to die. Those weapons aren't yours. We're the ones leaving." So then they fight each other. And the one faction actually leaves. I don't know why they didn't just agree to like send some of them to Gladstone to go and recruit help while some of them stayed there. They didn't have to actually fight each other. The town is then attacked by these sleeping ghouls, people from the village who were apparently under a spell and awakened at some point. I'm assuming the people from the inn. Daddy Eldridge declares that they need to flee now because the ghouls are overrunning the town. And soon, there will be way too many of them for any of them to survive. So they go into a building, but the ghouls come in and harass them. There's lots of fighting that happens at this point, and during the battle we have, quote, "If only I could just kill you, Eldred," came Charlotte's voice from outside, her tone laden with venom. "If only I could have just torn you apart when we met in the forest." She appeared in the doorway, flipping her hair in aggravated fashion as she crossed the threshold. Daddy Eldred raised his sword and bent his knees, ready to fight. Jebediah did the same, but his blade wavered, his arms almost too weak to hold it up. You know, this begs the question, now that I'm thinking about it, now that I just had that previous quote where they said that Charlotte was killed in the woods, if this is the same Charlotte, if this is Alton's mother, the one that supposedly Daddy Eldred and Marshall thought that they killed by burning down the house, maybe he should be like, "What the hell? I thought you were dead," but we never get that acknowledgement either. I'm also not sure why Charlotte couldn't kill him when she had enough time to monologue at him. Charlotte is also at this point talking to the kid Eldred because he had made it home. Now, I don't understand how she goes, "I would have killed you in the forest if I had the time," but she literally monologued at him. So she probably should have attacked him and tried to kill him, and he escaped her instead. I don't really understand. Again, it feels like something done for convenience, something done for plot, and a lot of the times when the characters start monologuing, that's all that it feels like. It's the sort of thing that leaves interactions feeling generic and shallow, as opposed to characters speaking and acting based on personal objectives that is character-driven storytelling. Then, I'm so confused as to how these people are related, have a history together. You know, did he not ever meet Charlotte before? He must have. He must have run into her at some point. He must have learned about her at some point from Allison, his ex-wife, his widowed wife. But they are still seemingly clueless, which makes it seem like every relationship is just starting off brand new. Quote, "What do you want, witch?" Eldred Sr. ignored her comment. "Vengeance? Oh, my brother, I've forgiven you. I mean, what else should be expected of the small-minded but to hate what they cannot fathom?" She laughed. "No, this is far greater than some petty revenge. Let us out of here, Charlotte. You can have the town, you can have the valley, and we won't say a word to anyone." Eldred Sr. half reasoned, half pleaded. "Let us go." "No," she hissed, taking a step into the house, a wicked smile sliding across her ruby lips, her eyes fixed on Eldred. "I need Eldred to undo the damage that my sister has done." "What damage?" Eldred Sr. asked, glancing back at his son momentarily. "You don't need to know anything about that. All any of you need to know, is that you'll be dying one by one in the most painful ways that I can think of, until dear Eldred here does what I demand," Charlotte said, her voice rising in volumes instantly to a thunderous inhuman rumble. Okay, a couple of things here. Number one, why doesn't Charlotte just say, "Yes, you can all go," in exchange for that boy coming with me? Because that's literally what's going to happen. So actually, yes, when they go, "Please let us go," and she's like, no, I need your son. So then just say, "Yes, all of you freaking idiots are free to go. I don't care, but I want that one." Number two, she had Eldred in the woods all by himself. And she told him that she needed Alton, not him, or that she wanted Alton, not him. She could have manipulated him so much easier in the woods when he was all by himself, being like, "Okay, I got a deal to make with you, Eldred. I'm going to attack your village and kill your daddy and everybody that you care about if you don't come with me." Because then she wouldn't have even had to go into the village and to attack the village and to threaten again. Number three, how did Daddy Eldred's wife never tell him about the seal that their son carries in order to stop Charlotte's magic? Because that specifically puts their son in danger. And she knew how seriously bad her sister was. She had to know, because her sister also was willing to sacrifice her own kid. Now, maybe that kid was born after the sister was already dead. Did she have no idea how bad her sister was? Because we also learned that there is no, as we go through this, we learn that there is no loyalty within the coven. They are all trying to kill each other at the same time. So, like, how is there anything in here? The sister, Allison, could have left the coven because she could actually trust Daddy Eldred and the village more than the coven, and wanted to get out, didn't want to destroy everything because the witches were wrong. There are so many things. And then how does Daddy Eldred not know what Charlotte wants? How is it that his wife never told him what the coven was trying to do? How does he not have any relationship? How does he not? What do you want, witch? She probably wants to murder you because you stole her child and married her sister and got her sister away from the coven. Like, how is he this dumb? He's gonna be like, hey, don't go into the woods, the deep woods. It's a bad deal, bad dealio. I don't got a reason for it. It's just bad. And then he sees the woman that he murdered, thought he murdered, in the house that he burned down. And he's like, what do you want? Honestly, you stole her kid, you stole her sister, and you burned her house down and murdered her. I don't think it's vengeance at that point. I think it's personal justice. I'm not saying that Charlotte's a good person, but the level of ignorance in this character makes no sense to me. Which ends up making it feel like these characters exist in a vacuum. Their relationships don't exist outside of these scenes, and they just ask questions in order to be stupid to give information to the reader. The point is the plot, which then reads into the point is the plot, not the characters. So even when they have relationships, you see no evidence of that history and how they interact. Now, this goes into the threats to take Eldred. Quote, we continue with the threats. Quote, you can't take my son, Eldred Sr. bellowed back at her, seemingly unintimidated by her loud outburst. I don't need to take him. He'll be coming with me willingly. Or do you want to sit and watch me kill them? She directed the last comment at Eldred himself, who lay quietly on the worn wooden floor. He stayed silent for a time, eyes locked on Charlotte's. Despite the people being enemies, Charlotte answers every question that is tossed her way from them, when she literally doesn't have to. She's in the powerful position right now. Quote, what happens when this seal is broken? Eldred Sr. growled, spitting a globule of blood onto the floor at his feet. Knowledge, Charlotte responded, will be imparted upon me, ancient knowledge lost to the ages, lost no more. Her smile widened. The same knowledge that my sister and I were seeking for so long. How do we know that you'll keep your word? He pressed, glaring at the woman through thick blood-coated eyebrows. You'll have to trust me, she said, her voice sickly smooth. Either that, or you die. Those are your choices. Again, this makes no sense because how does Daddy Eldred not know what Charlotte wants when he was the one who said that she was evil and told the son that she was evil, was going to sacrifice Alton and stole Alton away? He also married the woman who was helping Charlotte. He must have heard something. I know that I'm repeating myself at this point. It's just annoying that these characters are supposed to have a background together, but it's obvious they don't because of how they talk to one another for what feels like the sake of the reader. Also, those are your choices reads redundant in this context, but that's a nitpick, and I realize that I'm getting in a mood here. The alternations between monologuing and fighting is just, it's old. Also, how does he not question that? Are you going to use my son as a sacrifice because you were going to use your own son as a sacrifice? How does that not come into the conversation? How is Eldred not making any of his own decisions? He's just sitting there off to the side, not saying anything, listening to Dad say everything, and not participating. But eventually, Eldred does go with her, and once she has Eldred's attention, she explains everything about the ghouls to him as they walk through the forest. Husks, she said, just empty bodies filled with Paran. What's that? Eldred asked hoarsely, glancing up at the woman. Paran, the latent energy in the ground from the times of creation, Charlotte explained, as if this was a casual conversation between acquaintances. It fuels most of our rituals, lets us do incredible things. Who are they? Eldred asked, staring at the wall of faces. Travelers, merchants, slaves, farmers, people of all walks of life, Charlotte responded. And you killed them all for this? He spat, grinding his teeth. No, no, no. I spared them a fate worse than death. She shook her head, her long black hair waving gracefully. They were drawn in by the nightmares, and I put them out of their misery before they could be turned. The sleeping madness. It wasn't you? Eldred asked, surprise apparent in his tired voice. I feel like there should have been a contrasting story / legend from his dad to introduce the beginning of what ghouls were sooner, which would relate to the forest and why he needed to stay out. Then when told by Charlotte, you could have something else, and then you could try to figure out who is lying and if Charlotte is not telling the truth. And if it's Charlotte, which I'm pretty sure that which going forward, I am not sure if it is a world building issue or if Charlotte's actually lying, since we don't actually have a strong basis for what is true. Charlotte explains that she's not the bad one here, that there are things out there called keepers who prey on people's nightmares and suck them into them, and that she did the merciful thing by turning them into slaves to save them from whatever the keepers would do to them, which this is the first time the word keeper comes up, and we're not going to get a reference to keepers for like another 40 to 50% of the novel, and we're never going to get an explanation of who the keepers are, what they are, if he's heard of them before, if there are legends about them, where they come from. We're going to get nothing about them. No, that was the work of the keepers. They've been in the deep woods since the world was young. They draw in people to steal their minds, and once you are afflicted with their nightmares, you cannot escape them. You are compelled to come to them, Charlotte explained, waving a hand as she talked. I can get to them before the keepers sometimes, and then you turn them into slaves, Eldred said, his gaze dropping to the ground. He couldn't bear to look at their faces anymore. They aren't people anymore. They feel nothing, think nothing, Charlotte elaborated. They are puppets to be controlled and nothing more, which is not actually true. Conveniently, you have only plot necessary characters that are ghouls that are not mindless slaves. All of the rest of them are mindless slaves. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and say that I don't believe this woman who is going to human sacrifice her own child and just threaten an entire village just to get to Eldred to get what she wants. So I don't believe in her description that even the keepers do this stuff. Now, the story can prove me wrong, but this is just how, like, as I go through a story, I'm weighting what I'm being told and then what I am seeing and kind of trying to figure it out, because characters can lie. Unfortunately, also the author can lie, and then it gets difficult to tell. But at this point, it's like either a plot contrivance, or a lie. And considering who Charlotte has shown herself to be at this point, I'm going to assume the worst, and that she is lying. Though what's the point of lying about her evil when she openly threatened to massacre everyone in Eldred's village if she didn't get what she wanted? Charlotte leads Eldred to this cavern or whatever, filled with Piran and the energy of the world since creation. She calls it the World Seal. Again, it feels like there should have been some mythos to introduce this sooner. Does everybody believe in the Piran? Does everybody have a different thing to believe in? We don't really get a sense of what the common denominating belief of creation or belief of society or religion is. So you've got like, or what mythological creatures truly exist. And you can't even be like, well, the witches are these one-offs that are way over here, because at some other point, 80% of the way in, mind you, we're going to hear about gryphosaurs, because the people of Gladstone don't ride horses, they ride giant lizard things. So then we just have no idea what the common beliefs of anything are, and that what monsters are considered normal and what are not considered normal, what are considered mythology, because we're not brought into what these people actually believe to be real. And are the witches outliers, or are the witches the actual people that worship the evil gods that everybody else has rejected to live in a humanist society? Like, you see what I mean? And if there's a world seal that locked away the evil gods, then there should be some sort of mythology, whether people believe it or not, that talks about the world before the gods were sealed away. At least Charlotte should have told Eldred some of those stories when he was a baby, when he was younger, and then he could live with those mythos, whether he believed in them or not. Near this cavern that they go into are skeleton ghouls and a mirror that are all congratulate Charlotte on a job well done and ask Eldred why he's helping Charlotte. He's like, well, she threatened to kill my village, so that's why I'm here. They're like, fair enough, moving on. I don't think that this was necessary. They make slaves out of ghouls. Why do they care what his motives are beyond maybe worrying that he might betray them? But the threat of betrayal is still there if she's threatened to kill his family and loved ones. So it's like... Some other woman shows up and asks how Alton is. The two start arguing, and some dude in the mirror goes, quote, "You can squabble later. Complete the ritual and let Eldred get back to his family," he ordered. Why do these bad guys care about getting Eldred back to his family? Why not have him do the ritual and then slit his throat to get back at Eldred Sr. and Allison the witch, who abandoned Charlotte to have this child and to go live a normal life? Like, since when are we also being considerate after threatening to massacre everybody? Since we're going to break the seal to bring the Elder Gods back, who are going to murder everybody? Like, I don't know. Do these fogies in the mirror not know what Charlotte wants to do with? Are they not in on the breaking of the seal? What is the relationship between all of these people? Because the way that they interact makes implications. Eldred demands to see proof of life for Mary if he is going to help them. And instead of telling Eldred that he needs to just trust her and he's not in a position to be making demands, she just goes ahead and shows him a mirror that leans into a camera basically to show that Mary is there. I don't get it, since she was super cocky and demanding in the village, and now with this child, she's just like, okay, fine, whatever. I don't have any control here. Here you go. All this does is tell me that Eldred is going to be the safe one, who will never have anything really go against him, will get out of everything, and will have everything handed to him if he demands it. No one fights him on anything, but that's been since moment one, when he went into the cursed forest and came out without punishment or consequence. Because even if you look at the formal description of this book, it says that he is cleaning up his parents' mistakes. So it doesn't even blame the curse of the madness and the ghouls on his going into the forest. It blames it on his parents. They do some ritual that has to do with erasing sigils put in place by Eldred's mother, and then it looks like he's getting stabbed by Charlotte, which makes the whole "so we can return the boy to his family" even more disconnected from the story. The line wasn't even necessary. They should have just said, hey, can we just hurry up with this freaking ritual? Quote, "Suddenly, a pressure appeared on Eldred's side, pinning his arm to his ribs and keeping him from writhing. He turned his head to look through his foggy eyes up at the woman in the shawl, where she knelt on him, drawing a knife from under her shawl. The blade was a shining silver, but the hilt was identical to the knife his father had given him, with a golden snake coiled around the cross guard. No! Eldred screamed, pain and fear surging through his weak and tired body. As she raised the blade, Eldred's eyes flickered to Charlotte, who turned to face him, her smile turning to a sneer. She lowered her arms and let out a long laugh, the sound of applause a distant echo in the boy's ears. Now the story just awkwardly ends here, and then what this story does is it goes back in time to a different location to explain things up to the point that we just cut off of, but from a different perspective. And this is how it starts out, quote, "As Eldred and Charlotte stepped out of the house, Eldred Sr. backed slowly to kneel next to Alton, his sword still extended toward the pair of ghouls at the door. One of the ghouls turned and followed the pair out, stooping through the short door frame. The other, though, remained where it was, next to the open doorway. The mass of husks outside followed Charlotte and Eldred up onto the road toward the town square, shuffling after them like a herd of sheep following their shepherd. Daddy Eldred tells Alton that things are going to be okay, tries to harass the ghoul for answers, and then relents when he gets none. However, the ghouls are no problem, and he soon kills one of them, and the group of villagers that are still in the village escape. Daddy Eldred hears his son screaming in agony and just works his way through the group of ghouls without being held back, without being slowed down, without being restrained. And he fights them and Charlotte off of his son so that he doesn't get stabbed. And now you're like, okay, so there's this group of ghouls that are now just totally weakened and don't mean anything. And I can't remember if he is using the magic black knife at this point, or if they get the black knife from Charlotte when she drops it right here. I can't quite remember. But we're supposed to believe that these things are this threat when Daddy can fight them, when the son can fight them and kill them, and Charlotte just flees. Like, I don't understand why Allison would not better prepare them to fight the ghouls if she could literally make enchanted weapons that kill the ghouls. All she had to do when she was alive was, here, husband, the ghouls that my sister is going to make and attack us with, here's a weapon. Because obviously she knew, because she made the weapon, the dagger, before she died. So she knew something. She knew that Charlotte could make those, or would make those, or was prepping, because Allison was the one that had the information about how to make the ghouls. That was Allison's research. Now that the ghouls are being defeated, Charlotte is losing her confidence that she had. The narration telling you how cowardly, deflated, and fearful she is, despite being surrounded by her army of brainless slaves. I assume it's because Daddy's been killing the ghouls and she doesn't really know how he's been able to, but it's not like she didn't see Eldred and the others doing that in the forest. It's not like this is the first time. It's not like Eldred Daddy is not her sister's husband, who would probably have some sort of information from her, right? But now all of a sudden, Daddy is cocky and taunting Charlotte, and Charlotte is retreating. More expositing between Daddy Eldred and Charlotte that makes no sense. Quote, Allison told me about this whole seal thing, he continued, stopping next to the hole in the stone. Charlotte's eyes widened. No, she swore not to tell anyone. She swore on her life, Charlotte argued, splaying her hands in front of her. She knew what she had to do. So before she went to confront you, she told me everything, and then she went and made the seal. Why would Charlotte even believe that when there is zero loyalty among the coven? She left the coven. She took the research. And Charlotte is still going to be like, no, she would never betray the coven. She would never betray our purpose. She literally did when she got married and had a child. She literally did when she went to Charlotte later, which we will find out wherever it says it, to be like, hey, sister, I'm quitting. I want a better life. I've had a child. I don't want to do this anymore. And then Charlotte kills her sister. And she thinks that her sister would not share the evil, diabolical plans of destruction of the world with her husband? You know, the way to stop the coven from destroying humanity? Should we just keep that a secret when she quits? Where is the logic in that? With the rest of the taunting, he includes taunting the fact that she believes in some old god and this was all to summon, which just makes Daddy Eldred read arrogant and like an asshole. Quote, something about some seal draws in a bunch of pans and summons some old gods to Parth? Eldred Sr. shrugged nonchalantly. You dare disrespect Lord Dot? Charlotte screeched, rage suddenly cracking her voice and making her tremble violently. She balled her fists at her sides and took a step toward Eldred Sr. Oh yeah, that's what she called him. I believe she also said you and the rest of your Cretan gang have this weird obsession with him. Eldred Sr. laughed. He is our lord, and you are not to take his name in vain, she screamed, and the pair of ghouls who had hidden themselves in the crowd burst out from the opposite sides of the clearing, but Eldred Sr. was ready for them. Who is the crowd? Is the crowd ghouls? Is the crowd husks? Because husks also belong to Charlotte? How is it not that this entire crowd is converging onto Daddy Eldred? Because I thought most of the village had fled, and there were only a couple of them left behind now, dealing with this overrun of ghouls and husks. Because later in other situations, especially when we run into Beatrix, we're going to be told that the entire plan Charlotte was doing was to overrun the township with the ghouls and to raise it with fire. This whole place, the reason why they had to start fleeing was because there were so many ghouls. So who is this crowd that is gathered around everybody? Is it not ghouls and servants to Charlotte and whatever coven religion that they're doing right now? Who are these people? And why, if they are not related to Charlotte's slaves, is she not backing away to a point of safety, and the ghouls are not attacking them to kill them, to say to shut them down so that she doesn't get shut down? I don't understand the setting. Anyway, the two ghouls come out of whatever crowd is here, and Daddy Eldred fights more, and Charlotte gets pissy that he is taking out all of her ghouls. Quote, This knife has undone years of work, Charlotte said loudly over the storm, walking slowly from the safety of her mob toward the dead ghoul. Do you have any idea how long it takes to create a ghoul? Do you have any idea the years of study and practice and sacrifice I had to endure for these, and you kill them like they mean nothing? I'm sorry. I don't give a damn about your creatures, witch, Eldred Sr. spat. The more I kill before I end your life, the better. I can't tell if you're brave or an absolute fool, Charlotte laughed, stooping to pull the black-bladed dagger from the body of her deceased ghoul. As she straightened up, she glanced over the knife, turning it in her grasp. A fascinating dagger, but how does it... She started, but was struck suddenly by a violent force. She spun almost in a complete circle and stumbled from the impact. The suddenness of it and her shock delayed the agony that flared up in her shoulder as her eyes fell upon the arrow shaft protruding from her dress, the head buried firmly in the joint between her collarbone and arm. Her hand went lax, the knife falling from her grasp, clattering to the stone. Number 1, why did Daddy Eldred grab this specific knife if he did not believe in the ghouls and the gods? Number 2, why did he let that knife leave his hand and then just let her go and pick it up? Because if he loses that knife, how is he going to kill them? Because he must know that that is the only way to kill them, because his wife told him. Number 3, how does Charlotte not recognize the magic of her sister? Has she never seen her sister's signature? Is there no magical signature? Is there no information that was shared with her that you could create these things? She has zero suspicion that her sister continued to study magic after leaving the coven in order to create defensive magic to stop them. She has zero idea. These are the questions that I have. There's a point in this conversation with Charlotte and this back and in this interaction that feels like, and I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids. Charlotte's weak. Daddy Eldred is kind of a psycho because he's also killing these. They used to be people. They still sort of look like people. And you're just like, it doesn't matter anymore. I mean, they don't got faces, so whatever. But he doesn't really care. Charlotte gets away before Daddy can end her, as well as the unnamed woman who also appeared with all of this stuff. Daddy Eldred picks up his son and goes into hiding / a shelter with another person, a younger man named Jebediah, where they're hiding is actually the butchery. And as he sits with Jebediah, his son is kind of going in and out of consciousness, and we get exposition dumping of Daddy saying that the World Seal keeps the old gods at bay. The old gods had been fighting over what to do with humans since forever. He didn't really believe in any of that, even after what his late wife had told him about all of it. But now he might have to believe. Did he not believe that Charlotte was a witch when they went to burn down her house? When his wife was continuing to study magic? When his wife was writing letters to him, likely telling him about the magic? I mean, I'm assuming that he was being told about the magic stuff. Because with his wife being actually genuinely worried about what the coven was doing, it doesn't seem to make sense to me that Allison would keep it all under wraps, that she was trying to create resources for her husband and her son, also knowing that her son would be targeted, because we're going to get a letter later that says, hey, someday this is going to happen to you because you're the one that can break the seal. So my coven is going to come after you. My sister is not the only one in the coven. So, be prepared. Here are tools for you to use. Would his mother not tell anybody to get him prepared? Tell the husband anything to get him prepared? Maybe we just need a stronger establishment as to why he didn't believe his wife. He married her and he didn't think that she was crazy. He stole Alton from Charlotte because she was going to do a ritual, burned down her house, murdered her. There are just too many things that make it so I don't believe that Daddy Eldred would be like, I heard the stories about the older gods, but I never believed it. But I also said, don't go into the deep woods because bad things happen in the deep woods. And also there is this sleeping madness and I don't really know where it comes from. We're not going to guess that it comes from the witches or maybe the keepers. If anybody knows what the keepers are, I don't even know if those are common knowledge. They're not like normal people either. The keepers are like 4-foot tall monstrosities with lots of teeth and hair that feed on knowledge. This is also where we learn Charlotte apparently killed her sister Allison when her sister said she wouldn't help anymore. Considering she needed Allison's research, it kind of feels like you're cutting off your nose to spite your face, but who am I to judge? Quote, "The elder gods," Jebediah asked, "what are they?" "They were just old wives' tales. They're supposed to be a group of ultimately powerful beings locked in an eternal war over the fate of humans," Eldred Sr. explained. "Why does Charlotte want to bring them here?" Jebediah pressed further. "Blind worship? I don't really know. Probably thinks that they'll grant her eternal youth or something vain." Eldred Sr. shrugged. Would Allison not have told her husband what the coven's purpose was when she quit the coven? Because then that would give like motive as to what their pursuit is and why they pursue so hard. Allison being like, yeah, so in the coven they wanted to bring back the elder gods because all of us figured that if we were the ones to release the elder gods, then we would be the ones in control of the elder gods. And so a lot of what is done there is in order to basically try to get control of the supernatural. Whether that is actually what would happen or not when the gods are released doesn't matter, because what we're trying to establish here is the motivation behind the actions of the coven. And Daddy's saying, I don't know why they don't want it. I don't know why. They just feels like mystery box sort of thing going on, where it's like, I'm not going to give you any answers. Nobody actually told me anything. And so I actually... Or he just zoned out every time his wife started talking to him about any of this, because he's like, this is all bullshit, basically, like horoscope. So I'm not going to listen to my wife talk about the existential threat of this small group of witches that truly believe in what it is they're doing, to the point that her sister would want to kill her own son. Daddy Eldred says that he saw a ghoul before, but just didn't believe that it was the creature from the stories. Daddy Eldred is just coming off as an idiot. Yeah, Daddy Eldred is just coming off as an arrogant idiot, where he's got everything handed to him. He's got one of the most knowledgeable witches in the area. He sees things with his own eyes and then goes, I don't believe you. And it endangers everybody. And then he burns people's houses down. Let me just say, while I was away on vacation, which is why there were no live streams the last week and a half, I was watching a lot of Ghost Adventures and Paranormal Caught on Camera, which is a television show. Let me tell you, people had an easier time believing in interdimensional Sasquatches and time warps where dinosaurs come out if you're standing in the right place at the right time than this man has of seeing things with his own eyes. Jebediah asks to hear a story about the elder gods. Daddy Eldred is like, sure, I'm not sure that I can really tell you a whole lot because I'm a little rusty, but let me monologue to you in great detail. Quote, Wolf, rider of the eternal hunt, Eldred Sr. started, born of pure desire to conquer any and all beasts, to become the alpha wolf of the whole expanse. His sister and brother created and experimented with life, but he had no desire to build. He wanted to kill, to test the mettle of all creatures, and to feel the rush of the kill. He wanted everything his siblings created, easily beating even their most powerful beasts, mounting their heads in grand halls that he forged out of the magma of volcanoes. Eldred Sr. painted a grand picture of the hunter. His son's eyes flickered open, watching him closely, silently. Then, when man was born by Layla, his sister's will, wolves sought to hunt this new prey. We were small, weaker than many of the creatures that he'd slain with ease and soft. But we were smart. We crafted weapons to compensate for our lack of claws, armor to protect our flesh like a turtle's shell. Impressed by our rapid advancement, Wolf allowed humans a few centuries to develop and find their footing in this cruel world that we call Parth. He stalked them, watched from the shadows, his body in the form of a massive gray wolf called a warga, scars from the conquest worn like badges on a uniform. Finally, he could contain himself no longer and attacked a small detachment of hunters sent to stalk elk for their village. Much to Wolf's surprise, they managed to rebuff him, damaging his mortal body so severely that he was forced to abandon it and claim a new, fresh form. With his thrill of the hunt restored, Wolf prepared to attack again, but was again shocked when he discovered that the humans did not cower. They did not retreat. Even after he killed several of their group in his initial assault, they forged on, tracking and hunting him as he had done to so many creatures in his eternal hunt. He was impressed and decided for the first time in his existence not to hunt. Instead, he presented himself to the humans, taking on a human body. He was a huge grizzled man with a scarred face and a woolly gray beard and a mane of hair. He wore the pelts of beasts long extinct as clothes and armor and carried a grand longsword. He recruited the most fearsome of the human hunters, the most dedicated and ambitious. He guided and taught them to battle the creations of his siblings. He showed them the secrets that they needed to hunt more effectively, the weaknesses of the beasts they battled. He forged in blood and steel the order of the Wolver and led his hunt with his human body for hundreds of years. But the elder gods disappeared. After he vanished without explanation, his first lieutenant, Eldred Mord, led his hunt onward. The stories say that even after thousands of years, his order still rides the unexplored wilds of Parth, locked in the eternal hunt in honor to their leader, their god. Eldred Sr. finished, smiling at his son. Okay, so, he said, I don't believe in these gods. He is named after this god, and he named his son after this god and takes pride in his son being named after this god. So it's like going, I don't believe in Jesus, but I'm naming my son Jesus. I don't believe in Aphrodite, but I'm naming my daughter Aphrodite in honor of Aphrodite's backstory. Like, that's what this is. Also, we don't have any idea why Layla created humanity, because obviously she's the one created humanity. What was the purpose of it? What are they fighting over that has to do with life? What are any of these people's positions that they are at eternal war? Because we're also going to see Layla at the end of this, and she's like, do you want vengeance? Instead of like, do you want to defend humanity because I value humanity and don't want people to like kill? Part of it is just feeling like not fully developing these gods and their purposes. Like if you look at Greek mythology or Norse mythology or many of the mythology or Asian mythology, where there are gods or elders of certain kinds, they have specific purposes. And this puts Wolf there, but how is Layla different? And those differences are what's going to cause the conflict. But because it never describes anything that has to do with what the purposes of these guys are, what their values are, or like Layla, the mother of Earth, like Gaia. And then she acts in an aggressive way at the end of the story. We don't see these differences that cause these problems. We also, at this point, learned that Daddy was in some elite army with other people and he had a code name. It feels like this was done as a name drop for Ark, which was his code name. And the fact that he had some army buddies who also had code names, which are probably going to come up later. And spoiler alert, they do come up very soon after this. So it really just feels like information dumping to prepare for the next thing. Once they're done resting, they go to investigate this place and find the cloaked woman who had been with Charlotte, you know, the one that kind of ran off before when everything was going down. And it turns out that she is the wife of one of Daddy Eldred's old army buddies, who is now turned into a monster, but unlike the other ghouls, she still has a face. It's just a ghoulish face. His buddy apparently had gotten very ill with some magical ailment, and she had made a deal with Charlotte and or the Witch Coven to take out Daddy Eldred in exchange for an antidote, because she didn't want herself or her husband to die for abandoning the army, because she felt like what she and her husband did was treason in running away because he had been poisoned in active duty. Daddy Eldred just yells at her for being stupid, and though she thought that she committed treason and was going to be put to death, he has no reason. He has zero understanding of her situation. He goes, you know what? That's not what would have happened, but I don't blame you for what you did. It makes sense that you thought that that was what you needed to do based on the assumption of the consequences, but this could have been handled better. Nah, he just goes, you idiot, how dare you? Quote, it doesn't matter what you thought. I told you to come to me no matter what. You could trust me. I was your captain, and I only wanted the best for my men. Instead, you throw your lot in with witches and elder god worshippers for what? To get revenge? Take from me what you feel I took from you? Eldred Sr. spat. Beatrix's furious expression had fallen off and was replaced with one of confusion. That's not what Charlotte said, she said softly, barely audible over Eldred Sr. What did Charlotte say? That I would execute my own troop because he was in a rush to get home? Eldred Sr.'s gaze fell back to the woman. She said that you would burn our farm and us to cleanse us of Godfrey's plague, she explained guiltily. And you believed her at face value? Eldred Sr. shook his head. So what? She promised revenge on me if you helped her destroy the town? She let you kill my son to avenge the one that you lost? She had been training me for years, her and Allison. They were going to induct me into the coven when I was skillful enough, and all we had to do to get back at you was to help them break the world seal, Beatrix elaborated, glancing over at her ghoul, her husband. Then Allison married you and forsook the coven. She tried to get me to leave with her, but I was so blinded by my hatred that I couldn't see what she was trying to show me. Tears streamed down the woman's face, running through the black paint around her eyes. As unfortunate as all that is, you helped the madwoman destroy a village, killed dozens of people, and broke a seal designed to keep the gods off of Parth and out of our lives. Eldred Sr. responded coldly. I should kill you both right now. I should kill you both, right here, right now. He spat, making both of them flinch. But I'll give you a chance to repent. Tell me where Charlotte is, and I'll let you both leave with your lives. So a couple of things here. Eldred Sr. said he did not believe in the Elder Gods before. So what the frick is he currently being like, you destroyed the seal that was meant to keep them back? Bro, you did nothing to keep the seal back. You didn't even sit there prepared to fight Charlotte if she showed up because you didn't believe anything your wife said, if your wife said anything. I'm assuming she did because she left the coven, but leave that as an assumption. Also, how does it make any sense to accuse Beatrix of attacking Eldred Sr. for the loss of her son? What did he have to do with it? He was part of the troop, sure, but Godfrey was the leader of the troop, wasn't he? Or was it Eldred who was the leader of the troop? Because it's called Godfrey's plague. So what the frick does it have to do with Godfrey? Would it not be Eldred's plague, or is Godfrey a god? And so then later when we talk about Allison's brother, who is also his brother-in-law, whose name is Godfrey, is he named after another one of the elder gods that nobody has said anything about? Because maybe there should have been some information. But Eldred Sr. just yelling at her right here and just reaming her out and not understanding at all what her fear might have been and being like, no, this is about me. This is about how it's your fault, bro. You sent your son into the woods. You did nothing to protect anybody. And you're going to blame this woman who is grieving, like you probably grieved the loss of your wife. And you're going to be a pissy, self-righteous jerk instead. Cool. I'm glad that you suffer and die. The book gives no reason why this woman should not have been believing Charlotte, especially when you know that magic is involved, especially when you later see Jebediah, one of the younger guys from the village, being seduced by Charlotte to join the coven. When you see other people being seduced by Charlotte to join the coven, clearly, there is some enchantment that goes on here. And this guy is just going to scream at her. It says, even the keepers prey on your nightmares and then draw you in by preying on your weaknesses. And he just goes, no, you're a bitch who just betrayed us all. Screw you. I just... And the other thing here, because Daddy Eldred has obviously aggression towards Charlotte for multiple reasons. And the way that he yells at Beatrix is like with this assumption that she's supposed to have the same relationship and knowledge of Charlotte as he had. Beatrix wasn't even in the army. It was her husband who was in the army. So what knowledge would she have had as an army wife? Did she have any of the same information? Because it certainly doesn't sound like it. It's even more frustrating here when you think of Daddy Eldred having a relationship and a kid with Allison when she was still in the coven, where he would also have access to more information, and he saw nothing untrustworthy about falling for a freaking witch who quit the coven after the relationship, after she had a child and decided she wanted something else. But he's getting on Beatrix for trusting Charlotte. That's a choice. Now we're with Eldred, who is having sweat and fevers and shivering and agony as pain goes through him, and he wakes up in a well-lit room. A woman is calling his name, and he decides to just go with the dream. Yeah, he recognizes that he is in a dream and just goes, you know what? Go with it. Basically, the dream exists only for Eldred to meet this woman with green eyes wearing Mary's dress, who then tells him that he'll understand everything soon. He wakes up frightened, checks his surroundings, and then falls asleep again. Oh yeah. And he finds some mystic rock wrap that and he finds some mystic rock. Oh yeah. And he finds some mystic rock that he wraps in cloth and then puts in a bag on the wall in order to protect himself possibly from it because he doesn't know what it does, doesn't know if that'll help, but he just wants to try to do something to dampen the magic juju. He figures that he found it because Charlotte wanted him to for evil reasons. Meanwhile, I don't know why you wouldn't at least throw it out the front door. Meanwhile, Jebediah and Daddy Eldrick are still with Warwick and his wife Beatrix, whom he is threatening. I guess we're just abandoning Eldred the kid on his own when he's clearly struggling and possibly in danger post being used for a ritual. This is not going to be the only time that they kind of abandon somebody in perilous health. We'll see with the other Eldred here soon. And we get more answers that don't actually tell us anything as it's explained. Quote, "What does the ritual do?" Eldred Sr. pressed. "It's something to do with the world seal. Now that Eldred got rid of Alison's sigil, she can finish," Beatrix replied, her eyes still closed. "Yeah, I figured. But what is she trying to do?" Eldred Sr. asked exasperatedly. "I need to know what she is trying to accomplish with all of this death." The seal was dormant, but when Eldred removed Alison's blood sigil, Charlotte's ritual completed and activated the seal, Beatrix explained more thoroughly. "I don't know all of the details of how it works. Alison was the mastermind behind all of it. She said that the world seal's purpose is to keep us hidden from the elder gods. By activating them, it calls them back to Parth. Charlotte wants to permanently activate the world seal below Bowen Valley so that it'll always be a beacon to the gods." How did Alison not tell her husband anything about her mission of what she was trying to do that was in danger of her sister making it happen when she apparently theoretically cared about this not happening, which is why she put in some of these sigils to prevent things from happening? Like, she didn't pass any of this information on to her husband, or did she try to pass this information on to her husband and he just zoned out the entire time she talked because he thought it was nonsense? Like, is that where we're going with this? And why would they want to turn this area into a beacon if it just makes it invisible? What's in it for Charlotte? That's not something that's been explained either, and it could be that she thinks she's going to be able to control the gods. It could be a misconception, obviously, but we need to know what she thinks she's going to get out of it. And it's interesting that we're going to get all these monologues explaining things, but we're not going to get a monologue explaining what she thinks she gets out of it. No one knows what's going on, apparently, even those involved, and I have to say, hiding things from the reader doesn't really create suspense if the characters would know what's going on. This instead feels more like a mystery box thing where it's like, I'll just figure it out later and I'm not going to drop too much information now. Suspense is knowing that there is a bomb in the building and wondering if the heroes are going to get there fast enough to stop it. Everyone here is like, I don't know what's going on, and then explaining but still being vague at the same time, which isn't helpful. It's more annoying. Battle scenes commence between Jebediah, Daddy Eldred, Ghoul, Charlotte, and Beatrix. It's so nice that after he threatens to kill her and Warwick, they still help him fight Charlotte, literally within just a couple of pages of that threat of, "I am going to freaking kill you if I ever see you again." The group win the fight, and Charlotte escapes again. And Jebediah sees a window that goes into Charlotte's sanctum, apparently where his dad is. What's this? I don't know, it just kind of mentioned. We were never told about these sanctums, and while Daddy Eldred was a skeptic before, everything just rolls out now and doesn't get an explanation in any way, and Daddy is just like, you know what? I'm going with it, like my son goes with dreams. They ask Beatrix about the sanctum and how to get to Charlotte since they can't use the portal window. She explains that there is a village in the woods that Charlotte made. It's full of husks and would be full of ghouls if they hadn't killed so many of them. And you would think, is this in the deep woods? Is this a reason why they said don't go in there? Would Daddy have known of this, have heard at least the growlings? But again, like there are keepers in there, so the keepers are also living with them. Maybe this could have been used for folklore at the beginning of the story for why Eldred shouldn't go into the cursed forest. Ghosts and white faces as an old wives' tale his dad told him so that he wasn't so scared of what was actually going on and was willing to be daring to go into the forest. Or if anyone was saying to stay out of the woods, then they knew something and believed in something. It's ironic that it's the dad that goes, oh no, it's an old wives' tale, when he has all of the reason to believe in this stuff. Also, we get, quote, "All right. I don't know anything about keeper sanctums or what that is. Is it a problem for getting in and killing the witch?" Eldred Sr. cut Jebediah off before he could insult their new ally. Nice of you to suddenly care. It's a stash of knowledge gathered by mall keepers. The keepers will leave you alone if you don't touch any of their books, scrolls, paintings. She paused thoughtfully. Just don't touch anything once you're inside, and the keepers should leave you alone. The torments will give you some trouble, though, if they see you. They are like shades, trapped halfway between this world and the old realm, and completely insane. If they see you, they will kill you. I'm sure she thought that about her ghouls, too. Jebediah laughed dryly, drawing a glare from the woman. No, these creatures aren't controlled by Charlotte. They cannot be harmed, but they can rip you apart with ease. They're the victims of the keepers before Charlotte started taking their prey for husks. If you avoid them, you'll be fine. They won't stalk you and can't think like a human or ghoul does, Beatrix explained, stressing on the rip you apart part. Why aren't the keepers going after Charlotte for stealing their victims? Also, we have never heard what husks are or why anyone just believes in it. What are the keepers? And this is the first time that any creature has been referred to as a shade, and no one has any questions about any of it. They're all kind of just going with it, even though Daddy was a skeptic. So we're just supposed to know what all of this stuff is in the context of the story and what everybody knows, because the fact that they are not responding makes it seem like they are aware and it's not that big of a deal, and yet Daddy is like, what the frick is this stuff? And his brother-in-law chases monsters, and his brother-in-law has a bunch of information about keepers, and that assumes then that his wife would also have information about keepers. So why is Daddy Eldred so out of the loop? Also, how nice that they are all allies now when Eldred didn't even apologize for being an absolute jackass to Beatrix and her husband, but she helped him anyway. It really hits home about the lack of consequence in this book. It really hits home that there is a lack of consequence in this book. Like, you do something to somebody and they just forget the next moment, and there's no apology and there's no backtracking. There's just nothing. That's the choice, and the interactions don't matter, and just how unconcerned this book is with character choice. Everything moves because it has to move for the plot. Beatrix offers to show the dude where the village is, and he agrees. Doesn't even think that it might be a trap. Jebediah is like, can we even trust this woman? And Daddy Eldred's like, I don't know, but we'll take any help that we can get and keep our heads on a swivel, which is also ironic since later it is going to be Beatrix that tempts Jebediah to join the coven. Also, apparently, it's not that hard to get into the coven. They don't make you do any blood rituals or trust rituals or anything. They're just like, why are you here? I'm here to join the coven. Awesome. There's no hazing. After all of that, the two leave the basement or wherever they are and return to the house where Eldred the kid is. Eldred's set up 2 beds for them and made food. So I guess him having nightmares, sweats, fevers, and then passing out didn't really mean anything. And the time they were gone, he got his power nap in and got back up and got to work. Because this feels completely disconnected from where he was when we left off with him. I'm not sure what the time passage is in this. Maybe I'm missing something, but I just don't get how we get from him passing out from that bad dream to this. That's kind of also a difficult thing to tell with this, is that time passage period. There was that moment earlier where the inn was full of people with nightmare madness. Number one, so this town is so small that they don't have their own doctor. They had to wait for another doctor to come in, unless the doctor had the madness, the sleeping madness. But they said a doctor was going to be coming. But a doctor never shows up from, that other place. But we do get other soldiers from that other place. So what happened to that doctor? Daddy Eldred is too hurt to go looking for Charlotte after that fight, but the boys don't want to stop their pursuit. They argue that they'll go and they'll have Beatrix with them, so it'll be okay. They aren't going to be defeated that easily, but they don't want to let up and wait. Daddy Eldred is also like, I don't know if I'm bleeding internally. I guess we'll wait and see, LMFAO. He is bleeding internally, by the way. This is why he's going to die. So this is a great plan, especially after threatening people about freaking Charlotte's location. Also, we got this anime moment, quote, I'm sorry, Eldred Sr. finally broke the silence. Eldred jumped and glanced up to find his father looking at him, a shimmering tear streak running down his cheek, disappearing into his beard. Daddy tells Eldred to just go to the certain town, I think it was Gladstone or what it's called, where, all of the other runaways went, and to tell Godfrey about what's going on. Wasn't that what the other caravan was supposed to do? So, why does he need to go? Because the other caravan ends up in Godfrey's place. So why? Won't he take longer to get there because the other group left before and they've used days now? And did they go on foot? So that's another thing I want to bring up. It did not mention what was pulling their wagons. And then they get to Gladstone and they're like giant lizards. And I don't know if this town also has giant lizards because this town expresses having pigs, but we don't know what their normal transportation is because it's not like transportation that is to be expected and it's never described. Anyway, once Godfrey is alerted, he says that they'll send people to go and fight Charlotte, but Eldred doesn't want to do that because it's days away and that could take a while and then Charlotte could get away or her plan could, get worse. It's a great thing that Jeb is conveniently asleep during this whole scene, so he doesn't need to be taken into consideration for the conversation. Even though, one, he just got back, two, this is about finding his dad that he was very, very worried about because he saw his dad in the mirror. But, they got back from that basement and he just conked it. Eldred says that he's stepping out to go and get bandages for his dad and that he'll be back very soon. Where is he getting those bandages from? I guess they must have a pharmacy or a doctor's office somewhere. I was sure that he was just going to go run off and chase after Charlotte, but Eldred does not. Instead of getting bandages, though, he does walk around town and slaughter a couple of pigs for food. He does not bring back bandages for his father. So I don't understand why he didn't just tell his dad, I'm going to go find us something to eat. He runs into Beatrix while he's out there, and she is with her husband, who explains that she is also after Charlotte. Quote, "So you're one of the good guys now?" Eldred asked, cocking an eyebrow. "No, I swore my life to the coven." She shook her head. Whether or not it was the right decision, it's done now." She looked back up at Eldred's confused face. "But the job I was sent to complete is done. Charlotte managed to finish a ritual, and the world seal is active. Now I want the revenge that Charlotte promised me." So she's loyal to the coven, but not at the same time. He shouldn't even be surprised by this. He was telling his dad that he was taking her with him. He tells her that he doesn't want to go after Charlotte since his dad told him not to and to go and get Godfrey. The lady out here is Beatrix out here is telling him, no, you have to go after Charlotte or she's going to get away. Lord Godfrey is a useless imbecile. The fact that Charlotte's plan failed is proof that you scared her and can do this because the attack on your town that killed a lot of people was her failing. She was going to turn everyone here into husks and raise the place. Now, I could believe that this is Beatrix lying because she is actually still loyal to the coven. She's disloyal to Charlotte, but she does recruit Jebediah for the coven. So she is going to bring people back to the coven. And also, Godfrey has been hunting the coven for a while, like it's his career goal. Not like it is his career goal. It is his career goal. So her being like, oh, he's an imbecile, don't let him know, it's because she wants more in time. But also, this just brings me back to how is Charlotte losing? It's like it conveniently makes Charlotte struggle with power at the times when she is actually at the top. Also, with Charlotte saying that she was just going to turn everybody into husks, it makes me feel like Charlotte was lying about taking the victims of the Keepers because she was just taking anybody that she could. It wasn't about the freaking Keepers. Though what the frick the Keepers are, where they're from, what they have to do with anything, who knows of them, I don't really know because none of the characters were surprised to hear about them, even though they were like, what the frick are the Keepers? Yet, Nightmare Madness and becoming a hollow from the Nightmare Madness is a well-known phenomena, but not the masters of those things. Also, I'm not entirely sure, is it the shades that the Keepers create? Because we get to go back and forth between Husk and Ghoul for what Charlotte creates, but is it the Keepers that are also creating ghouls, or I'm not entirely sure the sources of all of these creatures. And aside, the Keepers in general just feel like a convenience to explain something away to us, but they have nothing to do with really anything. Conveniently, this husk woman approaches them to warn Beatrix that Charlotte is going to flee in about 30 hours, and she needs to get moving if she wants to capture Charlotte. "Why are you helping me?" Beatrix says. "I have my reasons." The husk says. Great. There's just more vagatories there's just more vagatories in the dialogue. I thought that we were told that husks were mindless slaves to Charlotte that couldn't possibly think for themselves. And I mean, I guess Beatrix and her husband are husks and or ghouls who have minds of their own. We're going to find out that also Eldred's mother is a ghoul that has a mind of her own. But then that just means that everything that we've been told about the husks and the ghouls is completely untrue. After the husk drops that information, she just disappears into the ether. They don't question her further. They don't stop her. She gone. I wonder if she'll come back or I wonder if she's going to come back or be another convenience. The answer is both. But she did show up to shove the characters in a specific direction. Beatrix is still working on Eldred to manipulate him into doing what she wants. Quote, "I'll have to think about it," he said to her, and immediately set off back to the village. "Think long and hard, Eldred. This woman killed your mother. She took Mary. She killed Marshal Forge, and she needs to die," Beatrix called after him as he trudged back into the village, leaving her and Warwick standing at the pig pen. She might have said, "Think quickly," because our time is limited. And this woman did not spare you anything. Like, that might have made more sense than "think long and hard, my child." I also can't see that as anything but manipulation to get him there all by himself, where he is in a weakened position and also away from his father, who is dying. Eldred gets back to the butchery, notices that his dad has a broken leg. Finally, he didn't notice before. I also didn't realize that he had a broken leg, and I don't know if it even mentioned it before, or if he was even limping before, or if it just manifested. Jebediah is now awake. Dad is coughing blood while trying to make a joke. I guess they waited to see if he was internally bleeding, and this is just the confirmation of that. Anyway, Dad's told what's going on. Dad tells them not to trust Beatrix, because once Charlotte's dead, she won't have a need for them. And don't worry about us coughing up wads of blood. It's all gonna be fine, bro. It's fine. Everything's fine. Aldred says, "You want me to go after Charlotte? But you just told me to go to Gladstone and get Godfrey." And Daddy's like, "Screw what I said, my guy. Make decisions for yourself like a man without me bossing you around." As if that's just not another way of Dad bossing him around, saying, "Look, disregard my previous order. Go after Charlotte." Yes, this scene from before didn't actually matter. Nothing happened to make his dad change his mind before sending his kid into a possible suicide mission after the almost death that happened 2 to 3 times in this book already. His kid being used for a ritual. He is underprepared. Nobody knows what's going on because there was a lack of information in regards to the spirituality of these people. So here we're getting more middle grade / young adult, where the kids are going to take on the savior role. But I don't really feel like he's earned this. His dad has done pretty much all of the fighting, while he has just been passive in all of the story so far. And then you get like this, "You go get him, champ. Ignore what I said before. Chase the witch. Make your own decisions." He's not really making his own decisions, but... They get dressed and leave, and then meet Beatrix and her husband in town to go into the woods. While they're walking, Beatrix tells them about Layla, the mother of creation. So I guess that's a witch-specific goddess that no one else believes in or hears about, and that his parents, mom and dad, never really told him about them. Even though mom was a witch, you would think that maybe mom would drop a little bit of lore about Layla if she actually respected Layla as the mother of all of creation. We switch over to Alton being with the same group that has been fleeing from Bowen Valley, and this is back to the slice of life as they travel. In this town, they meet up with Godfrey, who was already on his way to go to Eldred's town. It turns out that Godfrey knows about and believes in the Keepers because he talks to Darcy, somebody from Eldred's town, about what's going on, and says that he knows of the gods and the witch coven. So, like, why didn't Daddy Eldred talk about or believe in these things when his brother-in-law, brother to the witch wife, knows about all this stuff, believes in all this stuff, makes his life mission fighting this stuff? I know I'm asking this question redundantly at this point. It's just, I gotta bring it up when it is relevant into the story sharing moments. But there's just no, it just feels like there's no grounding to the characters or the world building or the lore or the mysticism in here for what would be what's a normal cultural belief. So the story feels like it has no culture or setting or identity. Godfrey gets info from Darcy about the happenings and puts him in a hotel with food, saying that he'll have whatever he needs. Just got to say what it is. I've left orders with the guys here that they will get you whatever you need. Don't you worry about it. Also, we're at about 73% and everything feels very, very slow. I don't know why the Alton Godfrey chapter was even needed, unless it was just to benefit of showing that Godfrey was on his way so that he didn't just show up without notice and it was very convenient. But Godfrey was already coming. They could have even run into Godfrey, who was walking with a doctor, because that we were told doctors were coming in to look at the sick madness people. But that's not what happened. We return to Eldred, and Beatrix and them are in the forest town fighting husks, and Eldred is asking Beatrix why she doesn't have her own knife like his that can kill husks. And she's like, "'Cause magic doesn't work like that. I don't know how to make it." They run into a keeper, and we're told, quote, "It's a keeper." Beatrix responded softly, "Don't touch their hoard, and they'll leave you be." "Their hoard? What do they hoard?" Eldred asked, his eyes wide and scared, locked on the bizarre creature. "Knowledge. Just don't touch anything that isn't the floor," Beatrix responded shortly, walking past the creature and into the hall, careful not to touch it. Eldred and Jebediah exchanged nervous glances and followed, edging their way around the creature. Now, this goes back to, was Charlotte lying, or is this some troublesome world building? Because apparently the keepers live with Charlotte. So that leads to believe that they are allies, that maybe they're creations of Charlotte, that they're related to Charlotte. They're at least on amicable terms, because they're not attacking Charlotte or any of the husks that Charlotte's made from the stolen bodies. Beatrix, Jebediah, and Eldred are going through the corridors, attacked by ghouls again. Warwick sacrifices himself and dies. It just felt like silly when they've literally killed hordes of these ghouls, and Eldred has a special knife on him, and they have killed so many ghouls. But now a ghoul can't fight a ghoul, and there apparently was no advantage to him being a ghoul. They couldn't just slip by the ghouls, looking also like ghouls, smelling also like ghouls, even if they were special ghouls. The whole idea of them being ghouls is not used to an advantage and not really used in the storytelling other than to be like, oh, they look scary and he was sick. But it's like there's no difference in the story to them being ghouls. They're not stronger. They don't fit in with the ghouls. They're not like, oh my gosh, oh, you're a person. Like none of that. Or maybe that, oh, why do you have consciousness? Does that mean that there is a way to bring other ghouls back? There's like no question about it. So since they have killed so many other ghouls up to this point, it just felt really weak the way that Warwick sacrificed himself. Beatrix is sad for a moment, but pushes off her husband's death with, well, he wanted to die since he was mutated, but stayed alive just to protect me and get revenge. Cool. So little emotion and it's already over. Eventually, they come across a magical book, quote, "That's the Wildervale grimoire," Beatrix said, startling the pair from where she stood at the door. "What's in it?" Jebediah asked, tugging at the strap, but to no avail. It seemed to be welded to the book, keeping it firmly shut. "All of Alison Wildervale's research. Only Charlotte has the key now, and it's the only reason the Coven puts up with her. She might be good at creating ghouls, but only because she plagiarized Alison's work and patched it all together to form her own sigils," Beatrix explained. Jebediah nodded and slipped the book into his bag. Beatrix, raising an eyebrow, "What are you going to do with that sealed tome full of God-sent sigils?" So why didn't Alison take her research tome with her when she left? It was left with Charlotte. And why is Charlotte so useless that literally everybody hates her, even though she is the one creating the army? And also, she is the one that captured and understood her sister's literature and research, and they're still like, yeah, well, you just plagiarized it. Do they not share research? Is it like, oh no, you only get to study your magic, and if you do anybody else's magic, screw you? Wouldn't you be like, you know what, we're glad that that dark magic is still around because the other one, cowered it out, but at least it's still here. I don't really understand the chemistry of this coven or what the coven is even trying to do when they all hate each other all the time and they're all bastards backstabbing each other. When you defang your villain like this, it takes away the stakes. And if the only reason that your characters can beat the baddie is because the baddie has always been and will always be incompetent, it just makes the journey look silly and pointless. I mean, we're at 75%, meaning that we're nearing the showdown and being told that the main antagonist is completely incompetent and everyone hates her. And I'm like, okay, what do we think the ending of this is going to be? The book just doesn't feel like it is even trying to make her a threat. We get this description, quote, "We won't be getting into one of the locked rooms," she said after clearing her throat, sounding more like herself now and less like the sad wife of a freshly deceased Warwick. It's just trying so unnecessarily hard to tell the reader everything that we don't need to know and dismissing character feelings. Also, cool, she's over her dead husband already. They think that they can't get through the locks, but Eldred thinks to use his husk-killing magical knife to cut the locks open and it works. Beatrix is impressed. She's part of a coven. I don't know why she didn't think that a magical blade could help break magical locks. Apparently, she just knows absolutely nothing about the coven, despite having studied underneath Charlotte, who stole Allison's research. In this room is a yellow dress. I assume it's Mary's yellow dress that we're referencing again. And they run into the husk that told them to come here. Quote, "Her study. I want her research before..." Beatrix froze, her eyes fixed on something down the hall. Eldred leaned around the woman to find the same husk that he'd spoken to in the village, standing near the end of the hall in front of a pair of gigantic wooden doors. It held a lantern in one hand, extended out in front of its body, casting its shadow back on the door. "The window is prepared. I'm stalling as long as I can. Tick-tock, Beatrix," the husk said with a wicked smile. This thing can think for itself. Why doesn't it do something? Or I guess in this case, we could also say that maybe it is still being controlled by Charlotte, pretending that it is not controlled by Charlotte. It is a puppet of Charlotte. I guess we could also say that maybe Beatrix and Warwick were also just being puppeted by Charlotte this entire time while saying that they are not being puppeted. But I don't have a basis for either of those things, so it's going to be kind of something where we have to watch and see how stuff plays out. We're told that Charlotte didn't know that these people had actually gotten to her hideout, even though they'd been spending their time killing a bunch of her ghouls, and there apparently was no sort of alarm, biological, magical in any way, when her husks started dying to alert her of when people came into her sanctum. And then conveniently, the husk exposits and then immediately dies. Quote, "Some unforeseen circumstances have pushed our schedule forward. The window will be completed within the hour, as soon as the Paran has gathered," the husk warned. "What? You gave me over 24 hours. What happened?" Beatrix asked, marching up to the husk. "My initial plan to stall was countered when a rather large supply of souls fell into our lap," the husk responded indignantly. "I've done everything that I can. You have an hour. Make sure that Charlotte doesn't." With that, the husk collapsed onto the floor, eyes deadened, totally limp. So it's very unlikely that this husk and Beatrix and Warwick were actually controlled by Charlotte as puppets to get Eldred there, specifically because of that. Also, how did she make it literally that long before she just died? She was able to say everything that she needed to, and we're also never going to know what her motives were, what her specific motives were, which makes this character feel like she was just a story function. In this other room that they get into, Eldred discovers a dresser that looks like the one his dad has. I don't even know what they're looking for at this point, why they're going through drawers when they're supposed to be looking for wherever Charlotte is hiding. They seem fairly directionless and are just wandering around. He tries to open the drawer, but it's locked, and he realizes that it's covered in runes just like the ones on his body. He nonchalantly shrugs and waves his hand over the dresser, and it opens. Conveniently, he finds a written letter to exposit us with some more. Quote, For Eldred Mord Kincaid II, if you manage to get into my old dresser, that means that you've broken my blood sigil and Charlotte has activated the world seal. I knew that this would be inevitable since the moment I gave her the finished diagram of the sigil requires to activate it. She doesn't understand what I've come to know, that the world's seals don't hide us, but rather shield us from the full brunt of the Elder God's power. Dialt, the god worshipped by my old coven, is already here. He seeks to regain his power here on Parth by manipulating the humans to do what he cannot, to deactivate the world seals and allow him to unleash his full power upon us. I made a breakthrough in my research into the Elder Gods and the power that exists here. Paran, the energy that is driving force behind all of creation and life, is not the only energy source available to us. There is a second, far more powerful form of Paran that I've named Soul Paran, the very essence of sentient life. Our mother, Layla, created this focused, permanent form of Paran in her experiments creating humanity. Soul Paran can be used to create or destroy gods, and that makes all of humanity a target for Lord Dialt. He wishes to gather our Soul Paran to annihilate his fellow elder gods and rebuild the expanse in his vision. Another elder god, whose name is lost in the annals of time, forged the world seals here when he saw the potential in Layla's creation to keep the elder gods from ever controlling that fearsome power. If you're reading this, it means that Charlotte has succeeded in her mission and the Coven will be attempting to break the other world seals as well. I know this is so much to lay upon your shoulders, but you must stop them before they bring the end of the world down upon us. You can trust my brother Godfried Vildervale and your father. Everyone else is an enemy. I've left you a gift that'll help you, and I hope that you've found it by the time you're reading this. I'll do everything that I can to guide you to it, but I cannot give you any specifics in any case Charlotte compromises me. I love you, Eld. Couple of things. One, why didn't she try to tell Charlotte any of this information that she has? Because she's like, they don't understand like I understand. Okay, that means you have information they don't have. Why didn't you try to inform them? Number two, why did you write this obscure letter and then leave it in a locked room in a cupboard, in a dresser that was in this village, unless you're going to tell me that Charlotte stole this dresser knowing there was a letter in it? But when did that happen? It doesn't make any sense. It also doesn't make any sense why she didn't tell her husband literally all of this stuff, knowing that it was going to come down to them to fight her sister should she die, especially her going to her sister to be like, hey, I quit the coven. Why did she even trust her sister enough to go and say, I quit the coven? Just like, don't show up. Just leave, just ghost her. And then have her like assassinate the sister in town. Also, I'm now thinking about how Godfrey is related to both Charlotte and Allison, who are both in the same coven, and it has been his life duty to like stop the coven. And was he trying to get both of his sisters back, or was he trying to kill both of his sisters, or was he only trying to get Allison back but screw Charlotte? Like, what are the family relationships here? Also, what is this? I left a gift for you to help you stop evil. I hope you find it. Why not leave it where he is literally going to be able to find it in a magic box that only his hand can open back at the house? It just feels arbitrary, making things harder and nonsensical for the plot, not because it makes any sense for these people. If you wanted your husband and child to be able to stop evil, then you'd give them the weapons straight up and explain this, not hide it in a letter for him to find somewhere else, maybe later. Tee-hee-hee-hee-hee. Godfrey is Daddy Eldred's brother-in-law and Eldred's uncle. How have we not heard this before this point at 80% of the way through? And Godfrey met Alton and wasn't like, oh, that's my nephew, you guys. Cool. We're told that Godfrey and Eldred Daddy have a close relationship. They were in the same army unit. They worked together. They're friends. But he has never met his nephews. He doesn't recognize his nephews. He's not like visiting his nephews when he is obviously just a couple days away of travel. And he obviously works in a sort of security that ends up in their village regularly. I don't understand. And the village that he lives in, the town that he lives in, whatever, is days outside of where the coven that he's been chasing all of his life is, where his sisters are. I don't understand. Eldred declares that he thinks that the world is ending. Beatrix is like, I don't care. I'm here to get revenge, and what happens, happens. Charlotte, fortunately, finally knows that they are there, so the doors on the building start closing. Eldred hears a similar song being sung and finally realizes that the woman that he keeps seeing with the green eyes and the yellow dress in his dreams is actually his mother. Not sure why it took him so long to realize that was his mother. I assume that they may have some sort of imagery at the house that looks like his mom, maybe. I mean, maybe they don't. It is medieval, so maybe they don't have any paintings of her. The shadow creature approaches them, and it is the last ghoul of Charlotte's. And Beatrix is like, no way! You can't defy your master! Excuse me? You mean like the random one person who did defy your master, and then the two of you who were also ghouls at some point? The two of you being Beatrix and her husband? At this point, I don't really trust any of the characters just to be misinformed, and I think it's the world building that's just not working and is inconsistent. Because Beatrix shouldn't even be like, it's impossible after that last one helped them. This thing is the mom and warns them. This ghoul is Eldred's mom and warns them of what they need to do and kill her if they must. Then screaming comes from down the halls. Beatrix says that it's the tormented and that they only sound like that when they're attacking. How in the frick is the tormented different from a husk and a shade and a freaking ghoul? I don't know. We pause at that moment to skip when we were in the middle of the scene to go back to Daddy Eldred, who just stops the momentum. Godfrey gets over to where Daddy Eldred is in the butchery in his village, and they exchange information about Charlotte, the ghouls, the runes on Kid Eldred, just begging the question more of how Daddy Eldred didn't pass on any of this stuff, even through letters to Godfrey. Daddy also finds a magic box that he can't open in the butchery shop. This box doesn't really come back, I don't think. Also, how is Godfrey so incompetent with this when it's his literal sisters who were the witches? A kid who knew nothing about any of this came along and killed all of the ghouls almost all by himself. His dad also took out a bunch of them. And they were non-believers, non-knowers until this. But Godfrey has wasted his life chasing these witches and has never been able to find them and has never been able to defeat them. And Allison did not send her brother anything to also help defeat the witches, knowing what his plan and goals were in life. He could have been an ally. He was so close. Godfrey and his team didn't even need help locating Charlotte's lair. They just get there. Unlike Beatrix. I assume it's probably Daddy that told him, but we didn't see that. He tells us that she's always been steps ahead of him, and then he just finds her location without being informed and defeats everything that comes to them. Godfrey reaches Eldred, Jebediah, and Beatrix. They defeat Charlotte with ease at this point, and it's anticlimactic how quickly it ends. Jebediah finds his dad is a dead husk, his mom is also dead, and his brother is doomed. They also find a bunch of survivors that they rescue. Jebediah is pissed, and he swears he's going to kill everyone who has ever used that magical torture, and Godfrey acts like that is ridiculous. Quote, I'm gonna kill them all, Jebediah whispered under his breath. What? Godfrey asked, uncertain that he'd heard right. I'm going to kill all of them, anyone who uses this torture. They're all dead to me, Jebediah growled, louder this time, his teeth gritted. Easy there. Not every witch uses husks, Beatrix said, backing up warily as Jebediah rose to his feet. So much of this dialogue kind of reminds me of the sorts of people that don't actually listen to you when you're talking and don't really participate in a conversation, but as someone else is talking, they're thinking about the next thing that they're going to say and then just say it whenever you shut up. Dude said that he wants to kill those who use the torture magic, not kill all of the witches. And Godfrey has theoretically been chasing after these witches all of his life because they are evil. And now he's like, whoa, hold up. That's an extreme take, son. We're not killing any witches here. Again, it feels arbitrary. Maybe he should have been like, let's make sure to use discretion and be careful not to lose our humanity to anger lest we become husks ourselves. That could have been a moment of like Godfrey trying to pull back Jebediah and shown his specific character instead of arbitrarily rejecting. As they move on, Jebediah is tempted over to a glass and Beatrix says to join her in the coven, and I'll help you get revenge. I know that they use magic to prey on people, but I don't know how this is going to work when he wants vengeance against the entire coven. They were turning him against Beatrix, and while he's got issues with her and threatened her because she was in the coven, telling him to join the coven which is what he wants revenge against, doesn't really make sense to me. Somehow, he is now so far away that Godfrey and Eldred aren't anywhere near him to see him talking to Beatrix and be missing. Jebediah is convinced to join the coven after he's told that all of the survivors they just found are all doomed and they're going to eventually die because their souls are leaking out. Apparently, Charlotte's not the only one who can make and control husks, as they belong to the coven. Theoretically. I mean, it said that, hey, she makes them. I assume they just work for the coven as a whole, but also apparently they don't die when the master died either. Maybe that's because she's not actually dead, just like she didn't die in the fire. We don't know. This is book 1. Things could change in the later books. Eldred laments the life he doesn't have anymore, the quiet life at home with his mother and with his father and Mary and his little brother and the brook and just going hunting. He and Godfrey realize that the lair is collapsing because there was some sort of trip that if you killed Charlotte, then the place was going to fall. Outside, we get, quote, he couldn't feel the frigid ice pressing against his face. He just felt numb on the outside, while his insides boiled in mental agony. I hate how often dark fiction goes on and on about agony and pain and suffering specifically, like it's telling you and not showing you the suffering of the characters, and it wants you to know that they are suffering without actually them being any sort of emotionally vulnerable in the scene and anybody seeing them ugly cry where they can't breathe or they collapse or any of that. It just goes, it's so much agony. It just comes off as distant, trying hard, especially the continual use of agony, agony, agony. Oh, and also, no one has any answers about where the frick Mary is. She's not in the tower, and Beatrix is like, I don't know. Who is that even? My coven probably didn't take her because I have no idea who she is. Don't worry, though. It's not like no one's lied in this story before. I'm sure Beatrix isn't lying. Godfrey and Eldred apparently just abandoned Jebediah in the collapse of Charlotte's place. They didn't even notice that he was gone. They don't ask where he might be. They don't think to look in the rubble. They don't say anything or even acknowledge that he is missing, or the fact that he could be dead underneath all of that rubble. Again, another place where Godfrey could have been like, this is an unfortunate part of war, and why people like me fight so hard to keep the peace. Loss will always happen, and the cost of war is not worth whatever glory or gold one believes themselves to get out of such events. Like, it could be Eldred actually having to face this horror of the situation, and this older man who has been doing this for years being like, son, I understand how difficult it is, but we just have to go. I'm sorry your friend died, but that's part of this. They go back to Bowen/Eldred's hometown, and his dad is, of course, dead. Godfrey says that they'll make a pyre so big that the old gods are jealous. Why the frick would Eldred care what sort of religious ritual they do if he and the villagers aren't religious, or he'd never heard of this stuff before? Also, I don't understand how they just left his father dying there on the ground when Godfrey didn't even show up by himself. Like, you're going to see him talking to random people, or maybe he did show up by himself. I don't think he left that other town all by himself. But we're going to get a point when just like random names are mentioned, but it doesn't really explain where they came from or that they were ever standing there. It's just suddenly they have dialogue and a name, and they've been there the whole time. But I wouldn't think that Godfrey would go on this skirmish all by himself from the other village when he knew stuff was going down. He would have been there with other people, would have even brought a medic, the medic who was coming for the night madness, and somebody would have been left to take care of Eldred. They may have even gone there expecting to find harmed survivors that they would need to get to care very quickly because they knew people were left behind. So I don't understand why this happened and why they saw him coughing blood up, probably puddles of dried blood on the ground, maybe not dried blood even because it was so frequent. And they still were like, good luck, Daddy. At this point, we switch over to Alton and them in Godfrey's town, and they're getting kicked out. Why? Because the elders have decided that, Godfrey's not here, so we don't have to listen to him. It's not like he's ever going to be coming back, so he can do whatever we want. Now get out. And so they are rushing the group of them to get out. Alton asks why they're being kicked out. We don't get an answer. He doesn't ask any questions. He just accepts it. None of these characters really seem to have any agency or survival instinct or rebellion. They just kind of go wherever they are told to go anytime it happens. And then we're with Jebediah again, where he reaches the coven with Beatrix, and he is accepted to join. And one of the robed figures, I think is Mary, maybe, says that she will help him get revenge. Why? I hope you didn't expect an answer. Eldred also follows Godfrey theoretically to the rubble. Eldred also follows Godfrey theoretically to the rubble of Charlotte's cabin. Not like immediately, but kind of assuming that Godfrey is there, he goes looking for him. He then runs into a ghoul who turns out to be his mother, who hugs him. Conveniently, certain ghouls don't seem to be mindless. He also overhears Godfrey and his men talking about keeping an eye on him in case of danger. I don't know why they wouldn't just tell this to him, because it might actually help, him, one, trust them, and two, stay closer if he knows that there is danger and that he should stay nearby and that is his uncle. So why wouldn't he trust his uncle, especially after his uncle helped him bury his father? It doesn't really make sense to me why they would hide that he might be in danger. He's already been used on the sigil. He knows his mother is important, so I don't know why they would hide this from him. He also finds a chest that has a letter in it from his mother, another chest, talking about how special he is and how she left things behind for him, for his dad to give him when the time was right, bringing further into question why the frick her husband didn't believe in magic and kept all of this from her son. And there are legitimate reasons. I'm not saying that you can't have legitimate reasons. Like, I don't want my son to have that kind of life, so I never told him about it. Once his mother died, I just hid everything that she had left because I was grieving so bad, and I just wanted to ignore it and pretend that it had never happened and that didn't exist. Like, there are so many ways to do this, but none of them are used, and none of them are explored, and there's no explanation, and it just ends up being, questionable. It's so random and keeps doing these letters of exposition and I love you, this is for you, but it doesn't actually matter. And that could be a setup for future books where he's getting information or he's getting items that are going to come into play later. But with so many things that fell through in this book, I'm not entirely sure what will be in the future books. They have a funeral for the couple of them that were dead in the village, and out here, Godfrey is crying as if he wasn't the reason why Daddy Eldred finally passed in the butchery alone on the floor because he didn't leave medics behind. I do hold Godfrey accountable for that because there was no reason for that to happen. At least somebody could have tried and then he could have died because he was too far gone, but it doesn't look like anybody did. While outside by himself, Eldred is visited by a bodied version of the goddess Layla, who asks him to make a promise, but it's a vague promise. Quote, "I have a favor to ask of you," she said, her voice fading slightly, as if she was tired. "What do you want from me?" Eldred asked, shaking his head. "Another riddle?" "I understand your frustration, Eldred," she laughed. "This world is full of secrets, and few who wish to impart them outright. I only ask for you to devote yourself to a cause, as your father did. Show the same flames of passion burn bright in the dark times to come." She stepped out of the fire, extending the sword's hilt to him, her visage almost completely transparent now. Eldred hesitated, staring at the blackened blade. The tip glowed with an amber heat, while embers speckled the metal halfway up the blade. Slowly, he reached out and took the sword by the ruined hilt. Starting from the top of the blade, under Layla's ghostly hand, a thick black substance oozed down the blade, coating it entirely, enveloping the scalding hot metal from hardening to a black leathery sheath. Eldred stared at it incredulously, his eyes flickering up to Layla and then back to the battered old sword. "A gift to aid you on your path," she said, her body fading out entirely, her robes falling onto the fire, bursting into flame with a flash. "And a promise." Her ghostly voice carried on the wind. Eldred staggered back, shielding his eyes from the plume of smoke from the robes. "What is the promise?" Eldred asked, glancing around as if expecting Layla standing atop the nearby building, but he received no reply. Okay, 1. This took away his agency again. Like, she should have offered him the sword, and then he should have made the decision to take the sword and say yes, or to imply that his taking the sword meant that he was saying yes. The other thing is, she said, "Make me a promise," and then said, "Promise me that you will devote yourself to a cause." And then he's like, "But what is the promise?" The promise is devoting yourself to a cause. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. That is also vague. What cause was his father devoted to? I don't know, because he said he didn't believe in anything. Maybe, again, that was a lie. We don't really know. But Eldred could have literally made a decision here and just said, yes, I will follow in my father's footsteps and taken the blade. And he doesn't even say yes. Also, Layla asks him if he wants to seek revenge, and she will help him seek revenge. So all of these gods really feel very the same. One of the things that Eldred is mad about is Jebediah disappearing, and he wants to find Jebediah and punch him in the face. There was never even any worry about what possibly happened to him. Like, he knew that Jebediah betrayed him. Layla blesses Eldred's dad's sword. I'm not sure why Eldred's dad's sword was, one, not already blessed, and two, if his dad was on a mission, devoted to a mission that obviously was somehow connected to Layla, because Layla was aware of Eldred's dad and was like, do just like your father, which makes me think that the father is connected to Layla. Why did dad say he did not believe in the gods? Why did dad not share anything about the gods? Why was his son ignorant to Layla? I don't know what the basic beliefs are of any of these characters, and why information was withheld from them. I also don't know how Alton, Eldred, and Godfrey never seemed to have met, because it seems like he would have been the type to visit them. It's confirmed that they're uncles and nephews. I felt like I was gaslighted a couple times through this, where I was like, did I really read that they were siblings? Because it doesn't feel like they know each other. And then it was repeated later, and I'm like, okay, because I'm not seeing the relationship. Godfrey then comes out and sees Eldred and asks him what happened. Eldred mentions what happened with Layla just now, and everybody is like mind blown. And Godfrey asks Eldred if he will join his ranks, if he will become his basically trainee underneath him. He will get merc jobs after he is trained, basically merc jobs, and Alton will be taken care of with all of this money that their dad apparently put in the bank in the town over for both of them. But because he will be paid so well, he won't even need that money, and Alton will be able to do better things with that money. So he should just give up the inheritance, come and join the guild, and then let Alton do what Alton's got to do. Everything is just taken care of. Eldred says, why are you helping me though? What's in it for you? And Godfrey could have been like, lol, bro, it's not like you even have a home to go back to. Or what are you gonna do? Live in rubble alone? Plus, I'm your uncle. Like, it only seems right. There were so many things he could have said in that moment, but he didn't. And that is the end. That is pretty much the end. So for my final notes of things that have gone on throughout, the tone of this book, it starts out reading middle grade slice of life and then goes into this feeling of action fantasy. It definitely did not feel very old at all, and it felt appropriate for someone who likes the Spook's Apprentice specifically. Thank you to Toasty for turning me on to the Spook's Apprentice earlier this year with the loin stream, because that gave me the comp I needed for this book to be like, I can see the audience for it there. Now, going into the writing, a lot of it was really awkward with ing grammar, dependent clauses, and run-on sentences, trying to stuff so much information into every sentence as possible. As an example, quote, failing and standing, he flopped back onto the steps, staring up into the sky, a streak of fire crashing into the inn above him with a thunderous boom, setting the roof alight. The sounds of screaming and the smells of burning wood filling Eldred's mind as his body was bumped and jostled, vaguely aware that he was being carried, but unsure of where he was or where he was going. And then the silence set in. This could have also been edited to avoid using so much repeated words in the same sentences or right after one another, and also to cut down on the repeated information, because many of the plot advancements were repeated multiple times. And the other issue that this created with the comma and the dependent clauses was that it would combine sentences with a dependent clause that did not have anything to do with the previous sentence. And so what dependent clauses are is that they are sentences that can't exist without the previous sentence. So because they're fragments. And so you would have like, he opened the door, pushing it open. Because if you just say pushing it open, it's not a full sentence. Pushing what open? And like, that's not a great sentence in general, but you get what I mean, is the dependent clause relates to the original sentence. If it was a full sentence on its own, then it would get either a semicolon or a period. And it depends on the kind of pause you want there. This book would continually do stuff like, Alton climbed out of the cart, the old man helping Maddie out. So you just made that dependent clause change into having an infinitive form verb on a subject that is not the same subject as the previous sentence. So those should be two separate sentences with the verb being the same tense as the previous sentence. And you can make that as a Alton climbed out of the cart, semicolon, the old man helped Maddie out. And then you've got a smaller pause so that it gets that pacing that I think this is going for with that comma. That would be a longer pause if it was a period. But dependent clauses don't generally work like that. And it is annoying to read and it is confusing to read, especially if you do multiples of those dependent clauses that don't relate to the main subject in a row. There was also so much telling language in this that the narrative felt like it wanted to completely control how you read the book. Adjectives were added to things that weren't needed, like scolded condescendingly, confessed guiltily. It was all over the place, telling you exactly how to read everything, explaining people's actions in run-on sentences to hopefully what felt like stop you from getting the wrong idea of what anybody was doing or feeling. That also is something that makes us feel younger because you're trusting the younger reader less to be able to interpret the content that you've written. But when you do it to an older reader, it feels like being talked down to, and you don't trust me to be able to read your work. Stopped in their tracks was used multiple times in this book, and I had flashbacks to friggin' Chuck Tingle that couldn't stop using it all over the place. It's a pet peeve of mine, and when you think of using writing cliches like deer in the headlights, a perfect storm, stopped in their tracks, think of it as inserting someone else's words into your story, because that's what it is. It's the cliche happened because it was such a perfect description for the thing that it was created in that other people started using it. So when you start using it, you're actually disrupting your voice by inserting someone else into your prose. The word Gryphosaurus first appeared at 80%. However, these creatures were introduced maybe around 30% earlier, but these creatures were introduced about 30% earlier, or whenever the Bowen citizens got to Godfrey's town. I don't understand how you bring in these creatures and don't say, oh, that's a Gryphosaurus. And then they also didn't actually acknowledge the Gryphosauruses as being anything strange, so then I don't understand why they didn't know the names or use the names in the narrative when they all obviously were familiar with the Gryphosauruses. And did they have Gryphosauruses back in the village? Because those were not described as being wagon draggers. At 75+% with Godfrey and characters in there, like I'm assuming other soldier characters, they are mentioned with having dialogue, never being mentioned, standing in the room, never being given their names until they've got their dialogue and then their name said. You need to establish the scene so people know who is in the scene. I don't even know if there were more than 3 or 4 people when it just had like 2 of them that just randomly popped up. Finally, on this, stakes. Another reason this suffered by not introducing stakes of entering the deep woods, just giving this vague warning of don't, is that it didn't allow Elrid to break the rules that his dad clearly laid out and then reap the consequences and then feel responsible for everything that happened afterwards, whether or not he is, because it looked like a combination within his family. There were no stakes laid out for his actions, which actually hurt the plot by not giving him the chance to be like, no, I need to fix this because I'm the one who did this and I made my own decision to defy and now I need to take responsibility and fix it. Instead, you have nothing. The only thing that pushes this kid who wins at everything that he does to take action is his dad going, don't listen to me, lol, go and do that other thing, which ironically is still him listening to his father. Going over to the cast, there's not really a main character. I mean, Eldred feels like he is supposed to be the main character, but his dad is more active in the majority of the story than he is, and then the switching between Alton and Godfrey disrupts his story, and he just feels like the OP character that none of the other characters really matter. There were also too many characters for me, not spending enough time with any of them to develop their own individual identities and to then connect with the reader to make us be like, oh, I'm invested in at least some of these characters. I need to find out what's going on with Mary. All of the characters also, and on that note, then they just all felt the same. There was really no difference between the witches, Layla, Giver of Life, the wolf god that we heard about. I mean, they all just were murdering, massacring each other. And freaking that makes me think the ghouls and the husks were humans. Some of them looked like people from the village because they were people who were taken from his village. Eldred killed them without pause, without remorse, without thinking that was the butcher, that was the neighbor's wife. He never paused to think about how those were once people, and all of these people in his village were dead. And that he was killing a bunch of these people, like ending them for real. Because, you've got other people being like, well, those aren't people anymore. Okay, they're already dead. But you're still looking at the husk of your neighbors. And he never paused to acknowledge it. He never paused to have a reaction. He never mourned. Aside from sitting there thinking, well, that sucks. I'm not really going to get to live the life that I used to live anymore, and I'm going to miss it. He never mourned, actually mourned all of the people that he killed with his own hands in his pursuit of Charlotte. And he didn't cry for Charlotte. And he didn't cry for losing his mother. None of it. The pacing. Much of this story is either preparing for something or doing some kind of slice of life stuff, or it's an action scene. Moving around with the different characters and reiterating something that we already knew for the characters also slowed the pace down. There was a lot of action in this story. Personally, it didn't mean anything to me because I didn't really care about the characters and I knew they were going to come out on top. So then when the scene was long fighting, I'm just like waiting for this fighting to end because I know what's going to happen. The plot also felt unfocused, undriven, and even just survival was undriven. Then you add this switching to Alton's POV where he wasn't doing anything, where he was not an active person. Darcy wasn't even an active person. When they were in Godfrey's town, they didn't even have the motivation to be like, no, we need to find a way to stay here. We need to argue. And then maybe they could fail to argue and then leave. But none of these scenes where you had a central character really seemed to have that character motivated. Didn't really seem to have that character motivated to do something specific and to go at it, to try to do it, and either to succeed or fail. None of it. And so then the story felt unfocused. World building. The ghouls felt like they came out of nowhere, especially when there was this warning about the forest that could have been played up into the sun, or, it having like, the forest is haunted. There have people been saying that you see ghosts in there. And again, this goes back to like possibly Mary wishing that she could go into the deep woods and being like, I heard ghost stories about like white faces in there and I'm kind of scared, but I feel like it would be kind of cool. But my parents say I can't go in there. Like, you could have done so much lore with those ideas that were out there, but none of it was used. And because of that, you didn't have Eldred coming to his own, making decisions, making mistakes, and then fixing it, or trying to fix it. Introducing us to some mythos about this world, Seal or the forest or Layla, even if it was misinformation, would have given the book stakes, tension, suspense, and culture. Without saying what's at risk when Eldred was being pushed into all of it, other than the end of humanity, vaguely, there's just no tension and there's no suspense as to what he's doing because it's just doing things as he's pushed to them. Layla and Dualt are mentioned by Beatrix, so we can only assume that they are specifically witch-related god and goddesses, but that makes me wonder what the general religion or origin belief is for Eldred's town and what Eldred believes. We never hear it. We don't get a sense of it. Don't even know if they believe in anything, except we do get something where he basically says he's going to see his father in the afterlife, which means they believe in some kind of afterlife, but what's that afterlife related to? You also have them kind of walking around saying my king or by the king, which look like a replacement for my god or by God, So that makes it feel more like a society that honors the royal family as opposed to religious gods of some kind. And when this is like a medieval setting and there are carriages where they're moving, how is no transportation mentioned until 70%? I mean, aside from, I guess, wherever it was earlier where you run into the dragons with Godfrey, but how is no transportation method mentioned in his township? Do they just do everything by hand there and it's all just hand carts that the people have to carry? Is it that kind of town? Finally, the last segment that I will mention is things that didn't seem to matter, some hanging threads that I found, and maybe they're not hanging threads, they could be something in the next book, but these were not resolved by the end of this book, and they didn't really seem to matter. One was telling Alton that his mother was Charlotte and that she was evil. This could have been a point of tension and conflict between Alton and Eldred. Oh, not only that she was evil, but that she tried to sacrifice him for a ritual, so her apparently being a witch was not surprising to him. And then the fact that his father and Marshall murdered his mother when they lit the house on fire and she was theoretically in it. Like, he had no reaction to that whatsoever. And it could have been such a point of conflict where Alton is turning on his family because maybe he wanted to meet his mother and now she can't, or that he saw his mother at some point, and then when he gets to meet Alton again later, Alton can say, yeah, Charlotte is dead, and then Alton is like, no, I thought I had a chance to meet her. And then he gets mad at Eldred, and then that creates tension. Like, there was opportunity there, but Alton didn't respond to any of that sensitive information. The random ball that Eldred found, and Alton is younger than Eldred, and Eldred is, I think, an upper teen. There was that random ball that Eldred found in his dreams wrapped in a towel. It was not mentioned at the end of the book, so it's probably going to pop up randomly in the second book if it pops up at all. There was also the magic box that Daddy Eldred randomly found in the back of the butchery and tried to open just before Godric appeared, unless this is the box that Eldred Kid found later that had a note from his mom in there that said, hey, I left you stuff to defeat the Coven trying to end the world. There was also the random exposition ghoul who said, I have my own motives, who just died. Their motive didn't matter. There were also many characters who just show up to go, you'll know the truth soon, but I'm not going to tell you. And then the story moved on. There was nothing about the keepers, where they come from, who know of them, how normal they are in society. If they're only related to witches, do they only show up where witches are? Do they show up where other things are? Are they related to the elder gods? Nothing on those. Now, I do, and I've said it before, complain about repetition and then repeat myself, that this is a series. So maybe these things will do something later, but the fact that they were even highlighted just fell off alongside other world building issues. So I didn't know what to trust. And some of it felt like maybe I'll use that later, maybe not. Don't know yet. And it's fine to carry stuff through a story. It's also why I like to try to finish series when I'm reading series, or I find a series, to see if elements that were done earlier or used earlier, created earlier, like complete the whole story. Because I know with Bodymore, 1, 2, and 3 are all basically, like, you need to read all 3 to get the full arc. They are complete in their own. But things that happen in book 1 and book 2 get rectified in book 3. You get to see a whole arc of Joey taking responsibility for the mistakes that she made throughout book 1 and book 2. So I try to give other people that same grace and that same understanding that maybe this will come back later. But when there is so much that seems to fall through where you don't have a strong feeling of like what this story is, or what this setting is, or what the characters even know, then it's hard to know what to trust about what items or thoughts will come back in the story. And a lot of the lack of emotional response and agency in the characters are things that really stood out to me for the lack of the story drive. So those are my thoughts on Queen of Ghouls. Will you read this book? Have you read this book? Does it sound interesting to you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. With all that said, have a great weekend and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer.
For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die.
Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that?
To the left, plain black letters read along the wall,
You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?